Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 26th, 2019 Santa Clara, Santa Cruz County's Airport Community Roundtable meeting here in Santa Cruz, California. I'm Steve Alverson. I'm with Environmental Science Associates, also known as ESA, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the roundtable facilitator. Out of respect for everyone's time, one of my roles is to keep the roundtable discussions on topic and within the time allotted on the meeting agenda. Therefore, I may interrupt a conversation and end a discussion to keep us all on track. I'll also insist that the member discussion and input from the public be respectful to each other, and in particular to our colleagues from the Federal Aviation Administration. Everyone at this meeting is an advocate for minimizing aircraft noise impacts. Therefore, there are no adversaries in this room, only allies. Roundtable provides a collaborative forum within which aircraft noise concerns can be discussed and recommendations can be forwarded to the FAA and others for consideration. This collaboration will be most productive in a collegial and respectful environment. Abusive or demeaning behavior will not be tolerated. You will note that there's a public comment period on the agenda, which is intended to provide the public an opportunity to share concerns with the roundtable members for their consideration. Due to the Brown Act, the roundtable is unable to take action at this meeting on items raised during that public comment period. If you wish to speak, and we already have a number of the speaker cards, please complete one of these white speaker cards. Evan Wasserman, who's from ESA, is holding his hand up. You can bring him to Evan, and Evan will make sure that they get up to Chairperson Bernald. Depending on the number of speakers, the chair may reduce the amount of time allocated to each speaker in order to stay within our schedule. For example, if we have 25 minutes allocated for a public comment period and we have 25 speakers, then each speaker would be limited to 1 minute. We thank you all for adhering to that time limit to start with. And with that, Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of us here today and to all of you. I'm going to ask you, I'm calling us to order, and I'm going to ask for the people on my right to introduce themselves with your city today, too, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Watanabe. I'm a council member for the city of Santa Clara.
Ed Bottorff, City Council, City of Capitola.
Michelle Wu, Vice Mayor, Los Altos Hill.
I'm Carlos Palacios. I'm the County Administrative Officer for Santa Cruz County.
Lisa Matichak, Mayor of City of Mountain View.
Mary-Lynne Bernald, City of Saratoga, and Chair of the Santa Clara Santa Cruz Roundtable.
Steve Alverson, ESA, Roundtable Facilitator.
Glenn Hendricks, I'm a council member for the city of Sunnyvale.
Steve Preminger, representing the County of Santa Clara.
Anita Enander, Council Member, Los Altos.
Cynthia Matthews, Santa Cruz City Council.
Lydia Cruz, City Palo Alto, City Council.
You need to turn your mic on, Lydia.
Oh, thank you.
Lydia Cruz, City of Palo Alto, Council Member.
We have a quorum, and I believe we are only missing one individual, Liz Lother from Monte Sereno. I am going to do just a... Oh, and Cupertino, okay. This is going to be a little problematic since I can't quite see, so do keep me alert, please. I'll do my best. I'm going to do just a little bit of housekeeping. As our facilitator, Mr. Alverson, indicated, we have gotten a lot of speaker slips, and I need to clarify something, and I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, Marty Ainsworth, but I have no idea what it is you would like to speak on. Which number? Is it the jet noise? Okay, good. Good. And I have received several cards for 4, 5, and or 6, and I will call your names, but maybe as we work our way through, if you find out that this wasn't an item you wanted to talk on, that you actually did want to discuss item number 5, please let me know. The other items that I would like to bring to your attention right now before we begin is that, as Mr. Alverson indicated, we are here to be a respectful group today. And I want to let all of you who have attended today know that we have been privy to the Select Committee information and Supervisor Joe Simidian's preface letter that he sent with the draft from the Select Committee, the recommendations that were approved by the congressionals and then submitted to the FAA. We are very, very much aware of the difficult conditions that you're living under and have been for years and years and years. And we are here today to receive a presentation from the FAA. I'm hoping that it will be well received and that you will respect our time and understand that we know how difficult this has been. If you have new items or any other questions that you have, please include those in your comments for any items. And also, if you have a statement to make and someone else in the audience finds that that person who is chosen ahead of you is speaking to the same issue that you want to, please feel free to raise your hands in support. I do not want to hear any clapping or booing out of respect for all of the speakers and the members. No finger snapping, no, just gentle waves, okay? And to move back to introductions, I would like to introduce our two FAA representatives here, Shawn and Favi, who will be speaking to us on several occasions, and our congressional representatives, Kathleen and Karen, here, and from SU and Panetta's office, or Panetta and SU's office as they're sitting, and our staff over here, Andy and Evan. And I hope that we can go forward in a good and positive and timely manner. The first item on the agenda is item number 3, now that we've gotten through some of the housekeeping. It is the approval of a resolution to affirm the SCSC Roundtable as the official body for future actions regarding the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals and the South Flow Ad Hoc Committee. Not in the packet, but I think pertinent to today, is a letter that I found as I was doing my homework last night that is dated June 28th, 2017. It is a letter from the congressional offices and signed by Anna Eshu, Jimmy Panetta, and Ro Khanna. And briefly, I will say, they have written this to the Cities Association, and thanks to Andy over here, Andy Jordan, she has pulled this roundtable together with the help of the congressionals, and I deeply appreciate that. Very briefly, the letter says, we write to request your assistance with the establishment of a long-term forum for aircraft noise concerns in the South Bay. There is a critical need in Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County for a permanent venue to address aircraft noise concerns, and we think it is essential that this body include all currently unrepresented cities in our congressional districts. It goes on to say, recently, the San Jose Airport Commission voted unanimously to recommend that the San Jose City Council approve the establishment of a roundtable forum at San Jose Airport to address the noise impacts of the airport's South Flow operations. While we agree that the Commission that there is a significant demand for aircraft noise mitigation entity to represent constituents in the South Bay, it is imperative that any potential body not be confined to San Jose or SFO airport-related issues, and also include representation of all affected and currently unrepresented communities in Santa Clara and Santa Cruz counties. Although the participation by elected officials in each affected city is essential, it is critical that the establishment of such a body should not be unilaterally implemented by one city, but instead led collectively by the entire affected region. And then in summation, it says, we understand that the developing solutions to aircraft noise issues is a complicated and sensitive endeavor that requires extensive engagement with constituents living in affected communities, facing sometimes separate but ultimately interrelated issues. Because of this, any proposed change to our complex airspace should not be the burden of one single city and can only be achieved fairly and effectively with a foundation of regional consensus. And so we bring to you today, and to us, a consent item that is asking for the approval of the resolution, not a revolution, a resolution Oh, Freud. To affirm the SCSC Roundtable as the official body for future actions regarding the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals and the South Flow Ad Hoc Committee. Lisa.
Yeah, so I read the resolution, and I was wondering, is this the appropriate time to pull it for discussion? Because I know I had some suggested edits to it, or do we want to, I think some members of the audience also have some suggested edits. Do we want to gather those and do it next time and consolidate all those edits? I think it'd be easier to do that than edit it on the fly. My biggest concern about it is I felt like it was limited to procedures that would be in the scope of our area of responsibility, when I think actually it's much broader than just procedures.
And Madam Chair, if I may add to that, my concern is that it really, the way I read it, would prohibit our taking up any matter that was in either of the two prior committees, either the Select Committee or the Ad Hoc Committee, that has been in any way reported on or acted on up until now. It seems to be like a from this date forward kind of thing, and I really think that if we are, in fact, the representative body as we understand it, that's continuing the work of those other two prior organizations, then we should take it up from anything that's happened from the time those reports were submitted, and I don't think that our current wording really enables that.
Yes.
I read this as a consent item, and I hear already that it isn't. I would think procedurally we'd want to have a motion and a second and then a discussion and perhaps table it or whatever. So assuming I might be right, I would make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second to approve?
I'd like to make a substitute motion then.
Steve, would you reiterate your motion, please?
My motion is to approve the resolution.
Okay, thank you. And Lydia, you would like to?
I would like to move that we table it for discussion at the next meeting, even submit edits to the chair and to Mr. Alverson for discussion next time and for approval at the next meeting.
I'll second the substitute motion.
Thank you.
That was from Lisa. Yes, okay. This is going to be fun. Okay. I believe now, following Robert's Rules of Order, that it has been pulled from consent, and we will open it up for discussion since we have some cards, and then we can discuss as the roundtable, or am I reversing my order?
Well, there's been two motions. Whoops. Yeah. There are two motions on the floor, so the roundtable needs to take action either on the first motion or recognize the substitute motion and take action on that motion, and then we can proceed from that point depending on which one's approved.
The second substitute motion reigns.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
If either of these motions were to pass, does that preclude hearing from the public who may have come? And I don't know if you have anybody who came to speak on this item, because I would want, if there's a way procedurally that we can hear from the public, I think we should make sure that we do that.
Yeah, yes, and that was my plan. Thank you. So we're going to take the second motion first, and that is to table it for now and accept discussion regarding on how it might be amended in the future. And now I need to look to you, Steve, because I'm not remembering whether the public speaks first, or I believe the public speaks first now. Yes. All right, so I have the three cards, Jennifer from Sunnyvale, Robert Holbrook from Mountain View, and Darlene Liapley.
Good morning, Board. I just wanted to comment. I agree that the vote should be deferred on this. There seems to be some contention as far as the verbiage, and it doesn't make sense to approve something that many of the board members here are questioning. Clearly, our goal in the resolution is to have the Roundtable be the body that kind of takes care of the select committee recommendations and the ad hoc recommendations, and I think that needs to be clear in the document. I, too, had some questions about the verbiage in the document because it seemed to limit some of the capability of this board. And so I would recommend deferring and wordsmithing this appropriately and having the proper discussion rather than rushing this through. Seems like there would be no benefit to rushing this through. And also, I wanted to make certain in this that as far as the ad hoc committee report that came through for San Jose, there were a lot of things that the FAA denied. I want to make sure that this resolution covers the ability to talk back with the FAA and talk about those things that they did not approve for whatever reason so that we could kind of mitigate the issues. So again, I see no reason not to defer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, Robert Holbrook.
I also strongly support the substitute motion that's been put before you. My reading of the text of the resolution would, strictly applied, preclude discussion of items that the FAA has not agreed to act upon. And we are nowhere near that point, in my opinion, in this process with regard to the recommendations that were made by the ad hoc committee on South Flow. If that were strictly applied, we could talk about two things. The FAA said that they would consider if somebody suggested it, and the rest of them would be off the table. And certainly we need to, at least I hope, we can have a discussion with the FAA to see if there's some middle ground that we can reach on some of these motions, ask some clarifying questions. Basically, this committee should be able to take up where the ad hoc committee and the select committee left off. And they should start with the reports that were produced and the FAA's response as the starting point. And to that end, I have drafted with my colleagues in Palo Alto and Mountain View, or at least a couple of them, some verbiage that I think achieves that objective without succumbing to the concern that this is empowering the roundtable to revisit the recommendations that were made. The recommendations that were made still stand. We're not talking about second-guessing them. We're talking about taking up where they left off and moving forward. And I believe that if you read this closely, you'll find that this gives you the authority that we need with the limitation that our congressman suggested was necessary for the FAA to participate. Thank you.
I support the substitute resolution motion as well. The scope currently is limited to only where the FAA decides to take action. Only where the FAA decides to take action. There are places in the report where it's not feasible, et cetera, but if you take a recent example from Representative Speer, there was a night hush procedure that the FAA decided not to take action. She pushed back. The letter is posted on the Roundtable website dated April 24th. And guess what? It's being revisited, and the procedure is now being looked at. That's why it's important not to move on. Some of these things need to be discussed, collaborated on, and revisited, because sometimes there's a misunderstanding or alternatives that are not clear. So again, a recent example in the last 3 months where Speer went at a not taking action and had it revisited, and it in fact is being moved forward. The second item that is limited in the document is in the now therefore section. It limits the scope only to things that may arise. That means anything that's already happened can't be addressed, which is why we're all here.
Thank you. And Jennifer Landesman.
Yeah, and just for the record too, Darlene and other speakers, just if you would say your name so we have that for the recording, that would be great. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Landesman, and I'm a resident of Palo Alto. And I don't have the language for substitute motion or the full conversation on this, but I picked up from the agenda that you want to have a resolution about what you will be in charge of. Given the controversies such as pirate, it would add to the extreme miscommunication to misrepresent a roundtable body as an official body for future actions regarding procedures, amendments, or changes. And this relates to environmental review. I request that you please clarify that the roundtable is not a proxy for the public. and that the roundtable will not act as FAA's environmental process substitute, nor as a substitute for public voice for actions affecting the public, as those rights are for the public to have with respect to notice and information for an action that may impact the public, okay, sorry, lost my place here because I'm reading from my phone, but I just don't want the FAA to get the idea that you're a substitute for environmental review.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now, is there anyone else who did not submit a slip for number 3? Okay, I will close the public comment period then and open it up for discussion among the members. Anybody? Lydia.
So I appreciate the public speakers who spoke, especially with what Darlene had said. That is a perfect example of why we want to keep, we don't want to have this limited to just what is on this resolution at this time. Additionally, I think that we need to add emissions into this document as well, and it's not just noise. So there's a few things that we should be looking at. The consistency of the language in terms of naming the committees. We should have consistent names throughout. So those are just some of the corrections that I'm stating. But the bigger ones is just let's make sure that we do not limit ourselves. So thank you.
Okay, Glenn was first, then.
Yeah, I think this is actually very simple. I think that I have a sense that the board here would like to go ahead and see language change, and I just want to go ahead and say my overview is that we should not be limited as a body in terms of what we're taking over and what we're continuing from the two organizations. So I don't have specific language to say, but I think my preference is that whatever the language we come up with, it just says that here, it's like, for example, the ad hoc committee was just continuing. And so there was no gap or break or limitation in what we can or can't do. So that's my hope in when this passes and what comes back as language.
Okay, and Lisa.
Yeah, as I said before, and as the two speakers before me said, I want to make a few tweaks to this. I feel like this is, probably 90% of the way there. I don't think these are major changes, but they're very important ones to address the scope of responsibility. And I am happy now that we have a break from council meetings for the summer. If you need somebody to collect information from everyone and consolidate it and come up with the next version, I'm happy to volunteer for that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else down on my right? Kathy?
Thank you. Well, we're not on break, Lisa, not yet anyway, in Santa Clara. But no, I appreciate the comments. The reason why I supported the initial motion was that, I felt that what was written addressed what we've already talked about in terms of the South Flow Ad Hoc Committee and what we're discussing now. But I understand, and it makes sense to just make sure we preserve what's been done in the past and make sure that there is continual follow-up. Because there are things out there that have been done that definitely need follow-up on. So the changes are like you said, they're not tremendous changes, but just the language to just cover what to make sure that going forward everything is protected and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else on my left? Cynthia.
Just assuming that this will pass, comments should go to...
Put your microphone on.
Okay. Just assuming this will pass, where do the comments go?
The comments should be brought to us as they are, sending them to the chair.
But who's the us, to you?
Yeah. Yes. I was.
Yeah.
Steve and I receive them. So yes, through the chair, please. All right. Then we had the motion. We had the second. The vote carried.
There's no
we
vote.
haven't voted yet. That's what I was double checking. Yeah. So all those in favor of tabling for this meeting the discussion of the the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Do I have anyone who has abstained? No, okay. At this,
That it's
yes.
not tabled indefinitely, that this is with the direction from this committee to get the revision done and get it back to us.
Yes. Later on in the meeting, we will be talking about whether we are, since some of us are on vacation, whether we'll be meeting in August or not. So that's part of what my wording is, why I'm talking the way I am here. Lucky you. So, yes. So, okay, we will be moving this on to the next time that we do meet, which will be determined later on in the meeting. Now we are at the point of receiving information from the FAA. We have item number 4, overview of the FAA's procedure development process. Favi, are you the presenter? Thank you.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon, rather. I'm Favi Garcia, Senior Advisor at the FAA, and I also want to introduce Shawn Kozica. Shawn is going to be following up on my presentation. Shawn Kozica is the manager for the Operations Support Group. This group is responsible for handling all of the analysis that we do for all of you. They do the reviews of the procedures, they write the reports, they prepare the presentations, respond to letters, congressional inquiries, and a number of things that they do, and not just for the Northern California area, but throughout the Western Service Center. They do a lot of work for us, for all of us, throughout Phoenix, Southern California, here in Northern California, and up and coming Las Vegas area. So at this time, I want to go ahead with the presentation, and when ready, we'll turn it over to Shawn, who's here to help us with some of the technical questions, possibly. So thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Or do I do that? Oh, thank you.
I was looking at
Okay, not up. Thank you. Okay, the first slide that I want to share with you is one that we touched on previously, but this one I believe has a little more detail, and I just found a typo. I'll correct that and send a revision. What this shows us is the website where the procedures are submitted. At the previous roundtable, there was a question asked about whether the roundtable can submit a procedure change or request. What I want to acknowledge is that, yes, the roundtable can submit it. However, we'll need concurrence from the airport, and there's an opportunity in that questionnaire as you go through the website. It'll ask you who you have coordinated with. And the reason I share this is because this leads us into the next presentation, which is the performance-based navigation procedure. So let me get to that. This is the chart also. I've shared that with you. I'm bringing it again to give you a visual of where we are, in particular with Surfer, that you will be hearing about later on in the presentation. Currently, we are at the design kickoff where the box is. And then the next item that is relevant for you is the public engagement process where you see the oval. As far as the environmental process, we have begun, since the kickoff of the working group, we have begun the environmental review process. Now, later in the process, there will be a heavier, if you will, environmental analysis where we will determine if a CADX or an environmental assessment is necessary. And the next slide will depict that, but a point to make here is that if you want any more details, I do want to acknowledge that in the Select Committee response of November, the FAA response to the Select Committee recommendations of November 2017, we go in detail about the process, and this process can take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. We're also seeing that it could take less than that, maybe more like 12 to 18. It's important to acknowledge the opportunity for the comment to review, because that you will be having an opportunity later on. This is a flow chart that maps the environmental review process. There's a lot of information that goes into it, but there are several opportunities for the community to comment. In the earlier chart, I showed there was only one oval that shows where the community can comment. However, depending on the project, there may be more opportunities. We have seen that regularly in Phoenix and Las Vegas. We've reached out at least 3 or 4 times. We've learned from our mistakes. We're trying to improve the process and engage the community more. This particular slide, the process that you see depicted lasts about 6 to 9 months. And it is included within the PBN process. So those 12 to 18 that I accounted for, this may be a part of that. Are there any questions before I go to the next slide? Because I think we tied in both presentations that you asked us to talk about. So if there's any questions.
Coming from the roundtable members, Kathy, are okay? And Glenn. Yes.
Okay. So if you go back to slide 3, I'll just go ahead and say, so you mentioned here public engagement. What is the tool or mechanism that the public uses to engage and interact with the FAA?
What we will do typically is work with our congressional representatives and now the roundtable, and together we'll determine what where we reach communities, but public engagement can mean, it could be anything from going out and conducting workshops to educate the public, or it could be simply a document notifying elected officials about a process that we want them to share with us. We do get their input typically, but it could be a number of things. It could be a webinar as well, and I'll turn to Shawn to expand on that.
Thank you. So, Favi, I think you covered it really well. Community involvement really is subjective, depending on what the procedure is and what the specific changes are. We really do like to partner with the communities, the airports, and the roundtables to understand what the needs of the community are. So if there is a change to a procedure that, from our perspective, from a environmental perspective, might seem de minimis to us, and if you all feel a little differently, we are very much open to a range of options for community involvement. Favi covered some of them. I've seen situations where we're working with the airport and they don't think that the community will see a big impact, but they ask us to put a quick PowerPoint presentation together about the changes so they can post on their website. Multiple community workshops is an option. Sometimes we've done webinars, so it just depends on what the specific situation is. But I want to make a note here that Favi touched on a point that we've really grown quite a bit in the last few years. It's been a big culture change for us. And I know that, with the evolution of technology, with satellite-based technology, next-gen, social media, we're all evolving, and we in the government are a little bit slower than you all are. So we're trying to catch up with you. But part of that evolution is the term environmental review is not really a static term. We now engage our environmental protection specialists from the ground up. So we don't get a design group together and design a procedure, put all the stuff on paper, and then wait and then have an environmental specialist look at it. We have an environmental specialist at the design meetings to make sure that there are any opportunities that there are to look at things on the ground and potentially avoid impacts to you all. We do that. And I'll just give you an example. There's a big Metroplex project out in Las Vegas, and every design meeting they have an environmental specialist there. And anytime they're designing procedures and they come up with a preliminary design, the environmental protection specialist is looking at where that's at, not just in the air, but on the ground. And if they're seeing it's close to, let's just say, a national park, or, it's within a mile of a residential area versus an industrial area, the environmental specialist is going to point that out to the design team right then and there, because they have a great opportunity to potentially mitigate that. And if it's operationally feasible, they're going to take those opportunities. So at one point, there is an environmental decision made. That's what the categorical exclusion is. But I just want you all to know that we are considering you from the very start of our design process.
So I appreciate everything you just said, except for I'm not sure I got an answer to my question. because you said here you want to have public engagement and it could take various different forms, but, and I'm actually in government, so I don't want to think that I'm behind the times, but there's got to be a process of how you share the information out with the people, whatever that mechanism is. You've got to have a mechanism for the public to be able to respond back, because that's how you find out is, here, we didn't think we were going to impact you very much, and that's where the public says, maybe we think you are. And I'm kind of hearing you say you want to do that, but I'm not able to visualize how that actually occurs. So could you try and help me out with that again?
I'll try to elaborate a little bit more, sir. So we follow the National Environmental Policy Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act and all the orders we have that support that are very subjective when it comes to community involvement, knowing that there are a range of changes that can happen to procedures or airspace. So it's not prescriptive in exactly how we engage you all. It gives us guidance, and in some situations, we're required to engage in community involvement, which would be maybe a comment period, but it really doesn't prescribe specifically this is what you do in this situation all the time. It very much is subjective, and we have to use our experts and our partnerships with you all and looking at the specifics of the situation to determine what's best.
Okay, so if you're saying it's subjective, I would interpret that as that I go into a restaurant and I have a menu, and I can subjectively choose from the menu of what's going to be. So is there a menu or a mechanism? Because again, I'm trying to get to, you guys have a website or the IP portal, whatever you want to go ahead and call it, that industry people use, but you don't want the public to use that. And if you don't want the public to use that, then what do you want them to use? And that to me is not a subjective decision. That's, it's the subjective decision is, well, here, this is our master, a list of 35 things ultimately we could do. And depending on what we find out along the way, we, pick and choose, and if then else, decide what to do. And I'm not hearing that there's a mechanism that does that. It's kind of a free flow. And if the FAA hears some residents are concerned, then you might do something else, but I'm not sure how the residents would have found out information to have decided if they wanted to be concerned or not.
So that's part of the process too, but I'm going to go back to, you mentioned, I think you're talking about the Information Flight Procedures Gateway, the IFP Gateway.
Sure.
So what you said the public isn't allowed to use that. It is a publicly accessible website. I think, and the impetus behind that website was to make sure that we're being as transparent as possible with you all. The challenge in that is that website is very technical. And when we post the forms for the procedure changes on there, it's pretty hard to determine what's actually changing unless you're a technical expert in that area. So it is a public website, but it sometimes is challenging to discern from there what's happening. So through our engagement with the community, that's partially how we determine what the community involvement is going to be.
Okay, I don't know that I'm getting very far.
So, Mr. Hendricks, if I may, I believe, I've heard you speak to this topic before, and I believe what you want is for the FAA to engage the community before the actual process that is in the oval here. You want to be...
I'm trying to understand what public engagement, when you're at this oval, what that means and what these people out here, what they're going to see and what they understand and the mechanism they use to engage with you.
So I hear what you're saying. You're looking for a black and white answer to a subjective question. You really are.
So you guys let them speak. This is what we're here to hear what they have to say, so please let them speak.
There's no way to build an order or a policy document that covers every potential change that could be made to any procedure over any given community. It's not possible to do that. Community involvement, the slide you're looking at there, that is our best way to show you all how we work our process. Community involvement, like the environmental review, is not a static process. Community involvement happens throughout the process. It starts during the design process when we have the airport at the table. And during the design process, the airports represent you all and help us understand the communities that we're working with.
Okay, so I think this is going to be, this will probably be an ongoing, continuing discussion, and I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here, but I'm going to add one comment that I think I'd like to be able to have addressed when we deal with the response to the ad hoc committee, because in that response, and I don't have my copy of the document here with me, but in that document, in black and white, it says the IP gateway is not to be used for public comment.
That's correct.
But you just said that's what you use.
That's not what I said.
Then can you help me out?
I will. I said the Information Flight Procedures Gateway was meant to be an information tool to provide more transparency to the public on what changes are happening at specific airports that you're interested in. I then said that the information posted on that gateway is very technical and it's hard to understand. I didn't say anything about not having a comment period. Now, there is a comment period associated with the Instrument Flight Procedures Gateway. That comment period is for aeronautical technical comments. So in other words, if we're proposing to change a procedure into, for example, San Francisco, that's an opportunity for all the users, not just the big airlines, but all the users to go in there and provide us their technical comments on how the change we're proposing could potentially impact them. That's what that's for. That is not meant to be an environmental public comment period. It's completely separate. And I think we've added a disclaimer stating such. It should have probably been added a lot sooner, but it is up there now. So it is a public website, but it's not designed for the environmental process. That's just not what it's designed for.
Okay. Again, I think we'll have ongoing discussions. If we could just go to the next page, I'll just add this comment out here. Page 4. Can we advance to the next page?
I'm trying, I'm sorry.
The one I'm looking at right here.
He's on page 3.
Okay, yeah. So page 4 here, I'm just curious, on this, with all this flow chart, which boxes have public input and what is the mechanism to be used for it? Or is that the same answer as what I've just got?
It's the same answer as what you just got.
Can you just tell me which of these boxes allow public comment?
Well, I would say what you're looking at is an internal process, right? This is us trying to explain to you all, like the previous slide, how we handle environmental reviews. This is not trying to tell you everything that would potentially involve the public. So the community involvement is a multifaceted piece, and it happens throughout the process.
Okay, and I'm going to end right here, and through the chair, I would just request that as when we're asking questions about how process flows work and things like that, I think it's really important to understand the internal flow. But I think one of the things, at least I'm very interested in, is what are the interface points of how the public is able to interact with whatever steps are the internal FAA flow.
I have a question.
Yes, Steve. You finished, Glenn? Yes,
Yeah,
Steve.
I'm done.
Okay.
And my question is, what is the relationship then of the roundtable in terms of all of this? How do we relate and interface with the FAA, the public, and all that, just to get the larger picture out there?
You want to do that, or you want me?
Sure, I can start. So as you know, as procedures are being published, we're trying to communicate these with you. And based on that, we can share the procedure with you. We can share a description of what that is going to look like. You can then share that with the communities. If as a roundtable you feel that it requires further engagement, that we can talk about that. We're definitely listening to you, and I don't know if you want anything to add.
No, I think you covered it. Yeah.
If I could piggyback on that, I did hear in the presentation community workshops.
That's a potential action that we would take, depending on the situation, yes.
Okay, can you briefly describe what situation would meet that?
Well, a change that would be considered significant, again, significant could mean a few things. From the environmental perspective, there's a term significant, and that's a threshold environmentally that we would use. That's a little different than the way the public uses it, but sometimes what environmental reviews think are significant don't always match up with what you all think is significant. So just because our environmental review comes back and says we don't think that there's going to be a significant impact, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to do workshops. If we're hearing from the community through the roundtable, through the airport, through our partners in Congress, and we feel like there's a need for you all to get information, to ask questions and provide input, then we're going to make a decision based on that. And sometimes that decision is to hold workshops. Many times when we hold workshops, they're not required. I'd actually dare to say that most often when we hold community workshops, they're not required. They're us doing more to help you all understand what the changes are and provide input.
So what I'm hearing is that the community that's sitting there needs to come to us. They need to go to their elected officials. They need to cover every base that they possibly can if they have a concern so that we can relay it to you, and then a workshop could occur.
That's a potential outcome, yes. And it's important to note, that there's a lot of you, and there's a lot less of us. And we really try hard to partner with the roundtables, Congress, and the airports, because it's our way of getting information out to you all. We can't reach every one of you, but the more we can educate our partners in Congress and the airports and the roundtables and get that information to them, the more they can help you get those questions answered.
All right, are there any more questions from, yes, Lydia?
So I wanted to find out on slide 3, where does the working group fit into there? At what point do they come in? Say, for example, the BSR, where would the working group be on this slide? At what stage?
The design the project initiation. I think I.
So I just want to, let me clarify the question, ma'am. Can you ask again? So you're asking at what point the actual work group happens?
The working group, yes.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. So take a look at the preliminary activities. So during that point, that's when we get a request through the information gateway to make a change to a procedure or design a new procedure. That's when we do internal reviews and initial coordination to take a look at what the request is. Is it from a big picture perspective, is it feasible? Are there concerns from an environmental or community perspective that would say just stop right here, don't even move on? And once we get through that, that's when the design kickoff decision occurs. That means that we feel like it's okay to move forward, that it's going to be a good business decision, that we can move forward, and there's going to be a benefit to you all and to the National Airspace System. And at that point, we would start the full working group process. So design kickoff decision.
And so at the preliminary activities, you determined that it would be good for the community and for the skies and so forth?
No, not determined. So the challenge to that is when you look at preliminary activities, you're looking at a concept. So
Right.
for example, you could go into the information gateway, if you were an airport, you could go in the information gateway and say, I want you to change every arrival procedure into San Francisco to make them better. Well, there's no way we know what that's going to look like until we get in there and design it. So we're going to do our best based on what the request is to understand what the situation is. However, if you go in there and put a very specific request in there and you say, I want to change this altitude on this procedure from 10,000 to 3,000. Well, we know depending on where that procedure is, there's probably going to be an impact and some awareness in the community. So we would have to really make a determination then through our partnerships as to whether or not we move forward. So it really does depend on the situation. And at that point, you typically don't have a lot of information because you don't have a design yet.
So is there any way that you could share with us, you said that community engagement is within the National Environmental Protection Act, it's within that body, right?
The National Environmental Policy Act.
Policy Act. Could you share with us, the roundtable, through our chair, that chapter or section so that at least we can have a look at it?
We can
and
provide
see
you.
what is the subjectiveness of it, and
Yes,
maybe we
ma'am.
can come up with something.
We can provide you with the link. I have a feeling you might be as disappointed as Mr. Hendricks over there when you see how subjective it is, but
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you have follow-up questions to that, we'd be happy to address those.
I think, sir, I know that you say that you want to have a lot of community engagement and so forth, but the IFP Gateway is a top-down, not bottom-up process, because it's so technical. A lot of us are not going to be able to understand it, and I don't think the general public will be able to either. And you said it yourself. So it's a very top-down process, and you have said yourself that we want to work from bottom up with with the environmental specialist that comes to the meetings. So I hope you would take that and consider that you are operating from top down, not bottom up.
Well, that's a fair point. But you have to look at what the impetus of that IFP Gateway is. It's not really meant for the purposes of what we're talking about here. It's not meant for that. It's really meant for awareness. So you can go in there and you can sign up for alerts at a specific airport and so forth. But that website's not designed for the community input that you're talking about. And frankly, I don't know if you would ever be able to get a web text-based interface that you're looking for. I think the interface you're looking for is questions and answers with the experts, and that's not really possible through that website. So that's where the community involvement comes in.
Lydia,
Which is why we need to further define the community involvement and engagement. I really think that's something that you have to think about.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other comments, any hands raised from the roundtable members. I'm going to open the public hearing. We are way behind time. We're going to have to lose probably item number 6 with approval of the committees. Yeah.
1.
Okay.
And that's the select committee update.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But it's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It is the next item, and we have speakers who have requested to speak. So first on my list for number 4 is Todd Anderson.
And given the time, we're going to try to, let's keep this to 1 minute if we can.
1 minute, please.
Okay, yeah. Todd Anderson, I live in Capitola. I'm really mad right now, but I want to make sure that we don't forget about the select committee. I've been through this thing from the beginning, and you heard all that. There was FAA at all those meetings leading up, so you've had public input, excuse the finger. And in February of 2018, you flipped the switch with NOTAM and moved back to BSR for 1 month, and flipped the switch and moved back. Why don't you do that now during the BSR overlay?
No clapping. No clapping.
You did it
I will
once.
shut this meeting down. We are going to follow the rules established as the chair. I'm quite serious about this. There will be no clapping. I understand you're happy with what he has said. I asked for an alternative, and that was waving of hands. Thank you very much. Good.
All right, so.
Moving on. Thank you, Todd. The next speaker is Linda McCain. Now, you have said 4, 5, or 6. When you come up, if you could indicate. You're fine? Thank you very much. Do you want to speak 4, 5, or 6? The jet noise, the BSR update is 5. Okay, fine. Thank you. I'll switch you to 5. Same thing, Stephanie Petrusek.
Just put me down for 5.
For 5. Thank you. And for Penny DeBaker? Okay.
My name is Penny DeBacker, and I've been a resident of Sand Hill Road, Scotts Valley, since 1967. Since the onset of the new flight path a few years ago, we residents have been plagued with overhead jet noise night and day. From an 8 o'clock a.m. to a 12 o'clock midnight time span on the weekends, my husband has tagged as many as 140 plus individual flights over our house in a day. Many he's missed. That means flight activity not more than an average of 6.5 minutes, many times every 3 minutes. During weekdays, my husband has to get up at 3:15 to go to work in Santa Clara. The airplane noise wakes him up repeatedly. My husband has a semi-professional recording studio on the property. He hasn't been able to use it since. My husband's a private pilot, certified AMP and an IA, who has been told repeatedly that he is accountable for his actions. And I quote, in 2017, when he attended a FAA seminar, they said to him, an agent said, "You don't know what you don't know. If you are accountable, you have to be accountable for what you know." The FAA has admitted that they did not do preliminary noise surveys, and you will be held accountable for your own standards. You set your own precedent in this matter. As a concerned citizen and resident, I beg you to return to the original flight path, which never affected us. Since 1967, my husband and I have been consistently drained, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. And I'm afraid he's going to have a stroke, a heart attack, or a nervous breakdown.
Okay, Penny, just for clarification, you actually spoke on item number 5. This was item number 4. Is that okay that I take you off of item number 5?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, Marie-Jo Fremont, item number 4.
So community engagement is critical. We all agree on that. Had we had community engagement for Next Gen, you wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be here today. So at the May 22nd meeting, the roundtable members asked several questions to Mrs. Garcia of the FAA regarding community engagement and community outreach. She stated that every project is different and that she would leave a document about the Phoenix community engagement as an example. She also indicated that she was also going to leave a document related to community outreach. So my questions are, have these documents been received? And if so, can they be posted on the website? And if they have not been received, could you please follow up to get these documents? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Darlene Yapley.
And while Darlene's coming up, I can tell you, Mary Jo, that we received the flow chart, and it's up on the website. That's what you saw today.
Andy, could you bring up slide 3, the famous slide 3 again? I just want to bring your attention to slide 3, that we're all focusing on a word called potential, so that doesn't mean it needs to happen. So the BSR overlay procedure that we're all interested in is, according to the requirements of DOT 41, is in phase 4, which is called implementation. And hopefully that's not correct, because that means no community review of the design, no update from the FAA, and no understanding of how this will impact citizens. It's up to the FAA. It's their latitude to decide if there's community engagement. We had no community engagement on Pirate. There doesn't seem to be any community engagement on the Big Sur overlay that is, the airport just joined in the almost final phase, 4 out of 5 phases. And we have no update on that. And gee, we had no community engagement on Next Gen in 2014. That tells you the process is broken, that there was nothing that triggered the FAA, which is why we're all here, of what happened many years ago. Nothing happened significant to trigger the community engagement. So there clearly is a problem, and I urge you to work with Congress to solve it.
Thank you very much. Cheryl Poland.
I'll wait till 5.
Okay. How about 6?
We'll see.
Okay. Okay. Jennifer Landisman.
Now, I also want to acknowledge that I see waving hands, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to thank FAA because I realize that there is a big culture change from the way things were before Next Gen and after. And I think there's a real opportunity for things to improve, not just for everyone here, but around the country. So my concern is that I heard that there are about 40,000 entries into the IFP gateway. So one little plug I will put in here is that I hope that FAA considers noise issues, give them a priority because it's impacting a lot of people, health on the ground. So the prioritization is a big deal. In terms of subjective and objective issues, I get the subjectivity, but there is a need for objective data. And we really need to, I mean, we don't want those workshops, you know, you've probably heard the term science fairs, where, you know, there's a poster board and there's, you know, an airplane and the sky. We need ADT data, we need modeling, we need supplemental models, and we may not have all the solutions, but we really need the data up front, which the airports can provide. I'm sorry, but I think some of these tables sometimes are too easy on the airports because they should be helping out and stepping up to provide data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer from Sunnyvale.
Hi, I really appreciate that the FAA has come here and kind of explained to us, and I think we do. The system is broken. We need to work together to figure out how to get better interaction with the public, and I think that's the first goal. Some things that I noticed during the presentation, one thing, the design process is with the airports representing the public, and that may be a conflict of interest. SFO is owned by San Francisco, SJC is owned by San Jose, so I don't know if it represents all of the communities. The second thing is, in some of the webinars and stuff that you were talking about, it seems like there's a telling, not a listening. And our community experienced that firsthand when we went to a workshop, and there was a telling and not listening. And so maybe we need to change that. And the other thing is the IFP gateway, even if you are technical, and I'm somewhat technical and can read that, it is overwhelming. So many procedures are coming through, and by the time the comment period is there, the design is done, there's not much we can do about it, and there's no interaction. It's just, again, a telling. So we need to look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. I'm going to see no other cards, unless anyone is rushing to the podium. I'm going to close the public comment. for 4, item 4.
Oh, sorry, no.
Yeah, I've got a bunch for jet noise. I'm putting them under 5, just in case you have a question. So come forward if you have.
Is it all right if I take Cheryl's place? Okay, Grant Wiesman.
I'm sorry, could your name again, please?
Grant Wiesman.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask if you could ask our FAA representatives whether or not the process that's taking place in Phoenix, being very similar to ours in that it's an overlay or a return to a previous flight path, which was very close by, whether there's anything in that process and the progress they've made, especially towards shortening a process, that they could share with us in any way. Do you understand what I was asking?
Yeah, and the audience addresses the roundtable, so the FAA is here to listen. If the roundtable wants to have the FAA answer that question, they certainly can. But right now, we're just taking the input, and so you may speak, but you may not get an answer to your question.
Right.
But they hear you.
So that was through the chair. Right. So
you've been heard.
You got the essence of my question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, that ends my speaker cards. I'm going to close public comment. Is there any further discussion among the members of the roundtable? Otherwise, we will move on to item number 5 because this was an information item. And once again, with item number 5, we are receiving from the FAA an update on the review of the Select Committee on South Bay Arrival recommendations. And again, the FAA is here to report to us. This is an information item today. There is no action designated on this item number. And again, we have so many speaker slips that we are going to have to go down to 1 minute. And I appreciate you being respectful again. Thank you very much. Favi, Shawn, thank you.
So once again, I want to give a quick overview of the process.
Turn your mic on.
Okay, I apologize. So once again, I want to give a brief overview of the process, just to remind us of where we're at and how we communicate these updates. Then I'll turn it over to Shawn so he can give you a little bit more detail. So during the last meeting, we heard from Christine, I believe, Christine Zanardi. Thank you. And she updated you on the process for the Select Committee. Where we are from the FAA standpoint is that since the recommendations were received, we provided an initial response in November of 2017. Then we provided an update later on April 2018, and subsequently the rest of the responses are listed. When we're ready to share the information, we send it to our congressional partners and have them provide input, and they ask questions that may be of interest to the community that we need to address during those updates. And sometimes we're able to provide more detail. In this case, the information that we're going to share today has already been published. It's been shared with everyone. There is no new information aside from the update that we're going to give you on Surfer. So with that said, I want to be clear that all of this information that we've shared now has already been published in the updates that have been posted on the websites by our congressional representatives. So Shawn, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So as Favi talked about the updates, so what we've been doing is we're trying to provide quarterly updates on where we're at with all of the Select Committee's recommendations. So you all have a consistent information flow, knowing that from a resource perspective, it's challenging to send someone out all the time to give you an in-depth update. We don't want you to have to wait, though. So the way we're handling it goes back to my point earlier, which is we're partnering with Congress to make sure that they understand these updates. So right now we have one ready to go. We're working with our partners in Congress to make sure that we have all their questions answered, because a lot of the questions that they're asking us, they're doing it on all of them, they're doing it on your behalf to make sure that the information we're putting out is A, useful to you all, B, helps you, is understandable to you all, with the goal of also having them understand it. So if you have questions, you can go to them, because we understand how cumbersome it is for you all to get information back from us. So we don't want you to have to go through that every time you have a question. So that's the point of these updates. So we expect that the next one will be out within a couple weeks at the most. As far as the surfer goes, I won't get into the history because I'm sure you all are well aware of the history of this. So I won't go there. Todd, to your point, the select committee's recommendations have not been lost on us. Hang on. We did have a work group June 4th and 5th to look at building a new or amended procedure to replace the surfer and go back towards the Big Sur. That work group was, from our perspective, successful initially in coming up with the design. So what happens now is they take the design that they got there in the work group, they take it back, they run it through all of our additional safety programs to make sure that it meets all of our safety criteria, and they also run simulations with the airlines to make sure that the procedure that we actually end up with is one that can be safely flown by all aircraft. In other words, what we don't want to end up with is a design that we think works for you all, it works for us, but we get down the road and we find out that there's one or two aircraft types that can't fly it, so we can't use it. We want to make sure that when we say it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So far, that's going very well. We're moving along in that. Once we have a procedure that meets all of our safety criteria and we know is operationally feasible, we will begin engaging again with our partners in Congress and the roundtables to show you all what the procedure looks like. And we will determine next steps based on that.
Fabi, you sent me something that was a little bit clearer, I think, from the working group. Is there a possibility that that statement can be read?
Yes,
I'm not sure what update you're talking about. Okay.
I got it.
It was on Monday.
Yes. Okay, so just a little more detail on the full working group. They did meet on June 4th and 5th, and I will read you the update. Let me just make sure I have the right one in front of you. In front of me. The FAA's full working group met on June 4th and 5th at the agency's Northern California Terminal Radar Approach Control to design a new satellite-based arrival route for San Francisco International Airport that would overlay the historic Big Sur route. This new route would replace the current Surfer route. The working group reached an agreement to proceed with the route that follows the intent of the original Congressional and Select Committee request to develop an RNAV star that would transition aircraft from the Surfer RNAV star arrival to the Big Sur conventional star arrival ground track to the extent possible from the Waves Fix northbound. The new route design will undergo airline simulation evaluations to ensure aircraft can safely fly it. Additionally, the FAA will conduct an environmental review as required by federal law. The June 4th through 5th working group meeting was led by representatives from FAA management and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. Other participants included representatives from San Francisco International Airport, Southwest Airlines, United Airlines, Alaska Airlines, Delta Airlines, and FedEx. Area members of Congress were not invited to participate in the meeting. So, again, these working groups are very technical. They're highly technical. It involves members or participants from throughout the FAA, several facilities. You heard the briefing earlier on Air Traffic 101. Most of those facilities, if not all, are engaged in this process. We also have the airlines and the airports, as mentioned here. So, it had taken a while to schedule this because we have some issues internally with scheduling, of course. As you may recall, we had a shutdown in December through January, and that really delayed our process. And to get, our co-leads are comprised of an FAA, I believe it's a management official, as well as a union co-lead. So we also need to consider that they need to be removed from their current work. And so to come up with the date was a bit of a challenge. In the same, as a result of the shutdown, we had to reprioritize all of the procedures that were either not published or the work that needed to get done. And so the work that was safety related took precedence. At any rate, we are here now. The work group was conducted, and more to come on that.
Thank you, Favi. I appreciate that. And that ends your presentation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now if we have questions, Carlos.
Yes, I was wondering if you could provide the community with the time frame for the environmental review process that you are going to undergo for this procedure change, and when and how many workshops will be conducted with the community as well.
Well, that's going to be a conversation we're going to have with you all, because we typically, I believe I am on, yeah. Typically, we're a safety organization, so we're working on changes that either originate from an air traffic facility or a criteria change or the airlines. This is a little bit different for us because this is a request from the community to make some changes. We're moving forward with it. Right. The select committee, right, yeah. Yes. However, when we get to the point where we have like I said, we have a design that we are comfortable with, and it's a mature design, and we begin engaging, what we intend to do is walk you all through those 9 criteria that you asked us to look at and explain what worked, what didn't work, why and why not. Make sure everybody really understands where we ended up. And depending on what that procedure looks like and what that conversation is like, then we'll have to talk as a group about what type of community involvement this is going to require, because there are some situations where community involvement isn't requested because the community asked for this. We have to talk about how we make sure that everyone is aware of the change. Typically, when we're dealing with changes like this, the community doesn't know anything about it because they're technical in nature. So we will be discussing how and when we engage the community. So you mentioned workshops. Workshops aren't.
So I'm sorry, let me just clarify. It was a request from the select committee, and that's why we're doing it. But also, just to answer your question, we will engage with you to see what community, or we'll have the dialogue to see what community engagement is necessary and what you recommend as a roundtable. So we will work with you on that. We don't know what that looks like at this time, but we're open to your input. And I guess we'll reach out later. I'm not sure where in the process we can reach out.
I have a question.
I heard, Michelle, I wanted to make sure that Carlos got his answer.
I have some questions.
Yeah, so at this point, in terms of just narrowing down the time frame, 3 months, 6 months?
So, yeah, I'm getting
in terms of the environmental review process and community engagement.
Right. So we need to get with you all and make sure that this is something that you understand and that we're all going to move forward together. And we're going to discuss with you all, our partners in Congress, how and when we engage the community. Once we have that down, we'll have a better idea of the timing. Because if you all, if as a group the consensus is we follow the select committee's recommendations, we don't think there's any additional outreach needed, then it'll be pretty fast. If as a group we decide that we think we need to do additional outreach to make sure that everybody understands, then we'll have to add that to the time frame. But typically procedures from this point in the process to the time they get published is usually up to 24 months.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Carlos.
I would just urge you to expedite this process as much as possible. This is clearly a crisis in this community. We hear from these folks all the time because they are under a great deal of stress and pressure. And so anything you can do to expedite the process, we would greatly appreciate. And
thank you.
Kind of hard to ignore you. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, we also want to make sure the community is engaged in this process as well. Thank you.
Carlos, your point's well taken, and this is definitely a priority for us.
Thank you.
Okay, Glenn asked to speak first, and then Michelle, unless your question was answered.
My question is the same as Colors. I just hoping that you expedite the process.
Your microphone,
Yeah, my process. I concur with Colors. The process need to be expedited as soon as possible.
Thank you. Glenn. And then Lydia.
So is there a program management schedule, high-level outline of tasks that you plan on doing?
What tasks are you talking about?
Well, you've just explained a whole series of things that are going on. You've got this, I'll just call it a project. Is there a schedule?
Are you talking about the Surfer Big Sur situation? Yeah. Not quite yet, because that schedule would include the community involvement activities, and until we've determined what the community involvement activities are, it's really impossible to lay out that schedule.
Okay, so through the chair, I would like to ask that the FAA come back and give us their template of what their schedule is, because I heard that we as the roundtable need to provide input of what type of community engagement there should be. So I said before, I'm an elected official, but my real career is I'm a program management specialist. And that's how you take something that has never been done before, which is what my career was in building software systems that nobody had ever done, and people would go, what's the schedule, when's it gonna be done? We would sit down, lay out templates. You know, I could produce you guys a schedule if you wanted. You know, even if you don't have dates of what it is, understanding the steps and sequence and decisions that you need to make. And I think what I'm hearing is you're asking us to be engaged in that process, which is fabulous. I'm happy to participate. But it's going to be very difficult for us to participate with a blank piece of paper. If you give me a piece of paper that's got something written on it, even if it's not 100% correct, then we can have that discussion and go through and start to see, and you can look at here timelines, durations, what they look like, what's the sequence, what are prerequisites of what needs to happen. And I'm hearing you in your discussion that all those things are going to occur. It's just and you want us to participate, thank you very much, I'm happy to do that. But I need a little bit of something so that we can look at something and not in a degrading way what you have, but be able to hear what's the vision you guys have, and then we can participate and share and expand and react to what you've got and go, here, we think this is what needs to tweak or that's what needs to tweak. So that would be my request through the chair, because I think that would help facilitate this discussion and get to what schedules and durations and everything are going to go ahead and look like. So that's the first piece. Then I had a question here for Steve. We've been talking about the updates to the select committee, and I believe in the last committee we had a discussion that says there's all these random inputs that come in, and we were talking about being able to create kind of a readable user's digest of that. And is there a timeline for when that will be available?
Yes, Glenn, thank you for the question. We've actually been actively working on it. It's almost complete for the South Bay arrivals portion of the select committee, and then we're going to do one for the South Flow ad hoc as well, have a very similar matrix. I believe, and I'm looking at Evan because he's been working on it as well, probably before, well before the July meeting it'll be completed, and then we'll circulate it to the roundtable and put it up on the website.
Yeah, and I would suggest that by our next meeting, whether it's complete or not, just be able to share with where we are along the way, just so everyone to have a sense of what that's going to go ahead and look like. And then I'm going to be remiss if I don't say this. It's said over and over again, these are very technical meetings. And what do you want me to understand by that? Because every time I'm hearing you say that, what I hear is, oh, that's technical, you won't understand. Is that the message you're really trying to give me?
No.
Can you tell me what the message is you are trying to give me?
The message for that is the design criteria that they use when they're designing these procedures is very specific. And when we're making those changes, when we're designing, everybody in the room has to have a thorough understanding of what those criteria are. And everybody brings something different to the table.
And who are those people in the room, please?
So that's a great question. That's where I was headed. So, for example, our industry partners, the airlines. So they are the experts on their aircraft and their flight management computers on their aircraft. They provide us input on what their airplanes can and cannot do. Our FAA technical experts provide the input on safety and design criteria to make sure that we are designing everything in compliance with every single order that's out there for safety. So having a thorough understanding of that and how the aircraft operate, and environmental is key to this. So those work group members are chosen and selected based on their specific knowledge of a certain area.
Okay, and just one last thing then. In terms of safety is very important, I get all of that. In terms of the success criteria, the parameters of what a successful product output is impact to, is noise level impact on the ground one of the criteria to be evaluated?
So safety is the most important aspect of this. And yes, noise is part of the environmental review process, and that is completed for every procedure design.
Thank you.
Okay, if I may at this point, I don't want to short circuit anything in terms of individuals having an opportunity to comment in this process. But something is very apparent that I think should be noted here, and I would hope that the FAA would do their part to do their homework to discover what the Select Committee did in the months that they met and the amount of public input that we had from the community. And I'm going to read from his Joe Simidian's transmittal letter, which he was the county supervisor and the chair of the Select Committee at that time. He noted on page 3, technical support was provided by the Federal Aviation Administration, whose staff was on hand at each and every one of our community meetings, 10 working meetings, and 5 technical briefings to both listen and respond to questions. And the letter says, as you well know, the process began with considerable public skepticism about the ability and willingness of the FAA to engage in a meaningful way. I must tell you that the staff of the FAA was exemplary in its persistence, patience, and professionalism throughout the process. Special thanks to the City of Palo Alto for hosting the committee's 10 working meetings and for the considerable multimedia support that entailed as well. But perhaps most important, thanks go to the members of the public who first raised these issues, who organized to make themselves heard, who testified in great numbers, approximately 250 in our first 3 community meetings, and approximately 130 at the subsequent working meeting of the committee set aside for public comments. And those written comments in the form of comment cards, letters, and emails that exceeded more than 3,500. I'd like to say that 3,500 to date, and that was in November, and I know we've continued to get those. These various public communications were essential to informing the understanding of the committee as we crafted the recommendations we now present to you. I think if you went back and were able to review those meetings, they're still live, they're on tape, that you would get the public input and comment that you need to go forward without stalling the effort here, because we have heard from these people. There are very familiar faces. There are thank you notes from these individuals to me personally. And I think we would all benefit if you would do that homework. Can you do it? That's my question.
Well, I would not characterize this as stalling. The environmental review process is required for every procedure change or design. So that's required. The decision as to whether or not to do community involvement and how to do it is part of that environmental review process. So if the discussion with you all and our partners in Congress and the airports is that we have that public input and we're ready to move forward and we understand this enough, that might be the outcome. We're not at that point yet. So no one is saying that we're adding any time to the timeline because of that. All we're saying is we're going to engage in a conversation with you all, and that might be the answer. But your point is well taken.
Thank you. Lydia.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd like to request that we have the Big Sur overlay for the next roundtable agenda at our next meeting. And if I may be able to submit questions to the FAA right now for the 30-day in advance, as we had determined to do.
That's not agendized, and so we can do that under member discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Lisa.
Thanks. I just want to make sure that when there is opportunity for public input on this new procedure, that the procedure is not so finalized that the public input, if we want some changes made, are too late. Because while both on the ad hoc and the select committee, we had ideas, recommendations, sometimes the details of implementing those might be a little bit different than what we had in mind. And so I think it's really important to make sure everything's not finalized by the time we have the opportunity for public input. And I would say there should be multiple opportunities for public input as things evolve, not just a one-time deal.
That was a question? A comment? Okay. We're supposed to be asking questions. Yes, yes, okay. I was waiting for the question. Fine, thank you. So I have a question, and I do understand that the full working group is a very technical, high-level technical group. We're getting a lot of questions today about how we communicate, how we can interact, Roundtable and FAA. Is it at all possible for a Roundtable member to attend the full working group meetings as an observer to report to the Roundtable?
So the order that we follow, 7100.41, outlines the work group participants based on what their skill sets are and what kind of input we need. So for example, industry to understand the aircraft and their abilities, the air traffic control facilities, environmental, and so forth. The airport is part of that list for their knowledge about the local community. We do typically rely on them for that input, but we welcome that discussion.
I'm going to go off. Bert, do you know about this?
I am aware of it.
Okay. Can you speak to it, please?
So as far as the process that we attended, I did present that the airport was aware of the overlay that was intended. I also did present that no matter which option was chosen, if it flew over land, it was probably going to be disagreed with.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And just for the members of the public who may not see Bert's name card, he's Bert Gendung from San Francisco International Airport, noise abatement.
My apologies for being late, too. We had a airport community roundtable meeting this morning.
Okay.
So I just heard you're welcome to have that discussion. How do we have the discussion? Where do we do it? How do we ask you to do it? How do we start it?
So let me try to answer the question. First of all, the working group just met, and we shared information with you, and that basically is all we have right now. The working group is still, I guess, deliberating, if you will. They need to figure out what the next steps are. I think we can have a better answer by the next meeting.
Okay, but I thought I heard him say we could have a discussion about maybe somebody from the roundtable being able to just, attend. So how do we have the discussion?
So I took the question as being very general in nature, as design group meetings, having roundtable members there in general. Was that your question, or were you talking specific to this?
I think the chair asked a very specific question, and maybe I'll pass it back to her, but I'm trying to...
It was a specific question.
And you're talking about this specific procedure?
Yes.
Okay, so the working group, like Fabi said, is already done, right? So
There'll be no more further ones for this.
It depends. If it passes all the safety criteria and passes all the simulations, there most likely isn't a need for the working group to get together again. If for some reason it doesn't pass one or more of the safety criteria and the procedure needs to be changed, they would reconvene the work group, sometimes not in person if it's minor, sometimes just over the phone, to talk about what the change needed is and determine if there's any other impacts. That's for this procedure, I don't anticipate that. So that's why, because that work group's already passed, that's why I took your question as more of a general discussion about how these work groups are done. That's why I said we welcome the discussion. But specific to this, the work group, their work right now is complete unless there's a reason for them to re-engage.
Will Bert be involved in further procedures?
Yes.
And Bert can come back to us, possibly, Yes, no, can you?
I'd love to speak. Right now, I've been asked not to speak until the select committee was addressed with the information of the simulations and the safety checks. So, yes, I'm aware of everything we did, what it looks like and everything, but, and I was ready to come back to our roundtable because I left early. It was supposed to be a 3-day meeting, went for 2. And I got there, and on my way back, I was called and asked not to speak to it, that the FAA would address it.
Okay.
So I have one other thing. So this is, I think, is an example of where we get hung up on very specific things. I think the more generic question I would ask the chair that, okay, so here, maybe they're not going to meet again. Okay, maybe they are, so we'd like to have somebody attend that. But if I understood, if I could see the plan, well, so that group's not going to meet, but somebody else is meeting. And can we attend that? I mean, this is where I'm trying to look at and try and understand. You know, it's not that we're just trying, that was the only place we're trying to understand. That's just the one we heard you discuss. If you could show us what the plan looks like, and doesn't even have to have dates, just sequential. That would be really helpful to me, because then the chair could look at that and go, here, this might make a good place for us just to attend or not. But when we hear and we get just these microscopic views of this is the step that's happening, oh, we can or we can't do that, I'd like to be able to zoom the microscope out and be able to understand the bigger picture so we could see where it might be other appropriate places for us to participate.
Am I possibly hearing from you that the plan is fluid?
Yes, it is, because you characterize being involved in the next discussion. Well, the next discussion, the next step, assuming we pass all of our safety criteria, is all about the community now. This is a community request. So now we'll engage with you all to show you what the design is and make sure everyone's comfortable with the next steps. Okay. So without having a final design, I can't really speak to specifics. And I know you want more specific information, and I could probably lay out a timeline of an average procedure and what the timelines are from start to finish. I think that's probably already been done. I probably send that to you. That's
not for us. Just not for us.
Not for you guys. I think it's done in general for these types of conversations. We can probably get that to you. But the next step is really all about the community and where we want to go next with this.
We have been told that in the very beginning that there are lots of us and few of you, and we've, as a roundtable, have been informed that we cannot request technical support at every meeting. So where do we fall with this then, in terms of being able to have someone, you, Shawn, lucky you, come back to the roundtable?
So we rely on our regional administrator and their staff to be the face of the agency and to engage with you all as often as possible. I think Favia's done a great job. I think she's been at every one of your meetings. Is this your 5th meeting? So I think Favia's been at every one, and they kind of divide and help each other work it out. You know, we have lots of roundtables all over the service area. We rely on them as our primary interaction with you all. The technical expertise is the hard part. We would love to be here at every single one and answer all your questions. We really would, because it's better for you and it's better for us. We want that. But our resources are so constrained that we just can't make that possible. That's why we ask you to give us your questions so far in advance that we can try to get those ready for you and make it a good interaction. I want to say that we can provide technical expertise no more often than every other one of your meetings, so every other month. And that too is a stretch, because you're competing with all of the other communities that are asking for the same thing. So I would, you know, that's a stretch, but I would say we can try to provide that technical expertise no more frequent than every other month. That's a generalization. If something comes up, we're obviously going to be responsive to you all, and if there's a need for us to come and have a discussion, we're going to look at that.
Thank you.
Just one last question. I'm sorry I missed. Shawn, what is your title?
I'm going to read off the card here. I hope it's right, Favi.
I hope so.
Operations Support Group Manager, Western Service Center. So Favi gave a great introduction. My group, environmental and noise is probably 10% of what our group does. It's part of our mission, but it's not our whole mission. My group provides support to the operation from drone activity to commercial space launches to military airspace to your everyday standard air traffic control procedures. So our group does a variety of things, and we're based out of Seattle.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Kathy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just have a comment just from listening to everything that you've said, and I appreciate, that you're taking under consideration, maybe somebody from the roundtable participating, but just listening to the workshop and the process that you go through, it seems like if you had somebody from the community from the very beginning, somebody with boots on the ground, that could be a part of the discussion. And I understand what you said about, not having technical expertise. I'm sure there might be some retired pilots out there that might be able to bring something to the table. And at the same time, if you're going to go through this whole process, this design workshop, if you had somebody there from the very beginning that would be able to say, before you do the simulation and find out it's not going to work, if you had somebody there from the very beginning that would be able to say, hey, I live there. I know it's not going to work. It would save a lot of time, so we're not waiting 24 months, for these residents to find a resolution, to this issue. So that's all I have to suggest.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the members of the roundtable? I am opening the public hearing. Okay, first speaker slip that I received was from Marty Ainsworth. 1 minute.
Make it very short. Thank you all for being here and understanding what a crisis this is, because it is a crisis. I've lived in my house off Weston Road in Scotts Valley for 42 years, and I'm being tortured. The planes go over my house every 90 seconds most of the day, and that is not hyperbole. That is the truth. And if they're not rumbling, they're screaming. And they scream at 3 in the morning. I'm an old lady. Unfortunately, my ears have not failed. Everything else has, but my ears haven't. And it's torture. And I've written letters. I cry, and I'm not crazy. I taught high school for 35 years. Anybody can, not anybody can do that. So please, please expedite this. It's been horrible. Thank you very much, though, all of you.
Thank you. Neil Gorstein, I believe it is, Henry Offer, and Alistair Fife.
Henry Offer. 44 years ago, I took a job in San Jose that unknowingly was directly under a landing path for San Jose Airport. Worked there 1 year and realized that I cannot live my life that way, where I want to have a house. So I bought my property in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which involved an hour-and-a-half drive, round trip, to my workplace. Worked there 44 years, enduring mudslides, earthquakes, forest fires, and the commute, and everything, other hardship, just to live in peace and quiet away from that, based on that experience of never wanting to do that again. Well, guess what now? I not only have I have bricks, and I am directly at the intersection of those two. And if you want to know where I live, just look up that intersection, because it's not just me, it's the whole community that was named Loma Vista West Incorporated in 1960s, late 60s, and a bunch of my neighbors are here. Quite a few people, quite a few properties that can experience that sound. So consider the intersections when you look at the detail of the design, and that's what fairness is about.
Thank you. I believe you were Henry Offer. Is Neil around? There you are. Thank you.
My name is Neil Goldstein. I'll try to make this short. It was longer. There's an old saying that pride goeth before the fall. Now, this is not the pride you have in your children or a pride in the job well done. This is hubris, arrogance, self-conceit, vanity, and the belief that you are better than everyone else, wiser and all-knowing. This is the FAA in a nutshell. Hubris is what leads to the fall they talk about with pride. I see the forcing of next gen on the public in this country as the beginning of the fall of the FAA. The hubris of next gen implementation seems to have spread to every action of the FAA and all its accounters. The FAA needs to be held to a much higher standard than it currently is. What do I consider the fall of the FAA? The rubber stamping certification of a flawed aircraft that cost hundreds of people their lives. It is time for the FAA to fix their past mistakes before they continue making new ones.
Thank you very much.
And fix them today.
Thank you very much.
Tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Alistair Fife.
Alistair Fife, for your time. Ms. Jordan has a handout that includes some letters that relate to what I was going to say. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to basically touch on two topics: the issue of community support and regional consensus. Hopefully, regional consensus is something living. And also with respect to community requests, I'm really hoping the FAA is noticing that along with 1.2R1, there's a 1.2R2, which I haven't heard anything said about today. If you look at the Appendix A, it's pretty clear that 1.2R1 is very much an outlier with respect to the vote tallies for it. It was a compromise crafted between moving the flight path and making it 9 essential conditions, 9 noise mitigating conditions. That compromise fell apart within 2 months when the FAA released information that not all of those conditions were feasible. I hope that everyone on the roundtable is familiar with Gary Waldeck's letter from January 14th of 2017, where he could not be more explicit that R1 would never have passed and we would not be here today if that information had been released by the FAA during the process, okay? So if you talk about community consensus, please bear those issues in mind. Another point I want to bring up is the issue of geometry. It's not just about altitude. If you take the existing flight paths and you move them to the west, and vectoring always happens to the west, you concentrate the noise. People
Thank
will
you.
not.
We have your letters. I appreciate it. Greg Hiver, C. Stewart, and Jill Bodate. Sorry if I'm slaughtering your names. Please go ahead.
Hi, Greg Hiver from SoCal, lived there for 20 years. Flight path right above my house. All I have to do is look up every day. How has my family been rewarded for our particular sacrifices? Here's how. The FAA has implanted a 24-hour-a-day noise beacon over our heads that has negatively affected our sleep patterns, our moods, and our lifestyle. The FAA has harmed our Airbnb business that helps us pay the bills. The FAA has mistakenly, for lack of a better word, stolen 10 to 15% of our property value, translating into roughly $250,000 without providing us with offsetting compensation. And you have deprived us of the core reason why we moved to the SoCal Mountains in the first place, for their serenity, which is priceless. I implore you without delay to put into effect the Select Committee recommendations to abort Surfer and to relegate it to the trash heap of history where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you. C. Stewart. If you could begin to line up as the time is beginning to wind down, that'll help us. And again, Jill Boat-8, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kathy Stewart. I live at West Summit at 2,000 feet. The noise is horrendous day and night. This has been going on for a really long time. Expedite, please expedite.
Thank you for your brevity. I appreciate that, as many of us do. Jill? Patrick Meyer? And Dave Austin.
Go ahead.
No. I'm going to mess up our forms. That's okay.
Hello, and thank you very much for providing this time for us to speak with you. I am a part of Save Our Skies of Santa Cruz County, and as you can see of us all in red, we are angry, and we have been angry for 4 years now. Out of the blue, without any due process, our lives were turned upside down by noise. I live at 1,000 feet, and at that height, I am constantly barraged with jet noise from very, very early in the morning till very, very late at night. There's Korean Airlines that wakes us up, sometimes as late as 3 in the morning. As you can see, people are so tired, and they have been so involved in this process. I ask that you please expedite this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Jill?
Hey, my name is Jill Boatwright. But just another disappointing day coming down and spending our time here. But Another 24 months of this is just unacceptable, and I'd really like you to expedite it. But even better, I would love for you to push the button, the NOTAM button, to go back to BSR. In the meantime, take your time with it, do all your studies, and let us have a break in the meantime. You did it for that short period. I'm sure you could do it now if you really wanted to.
Dave.
Hi, my name is Dave Austin. I'm a retired air carrier pilot. I flew the Big Sur before it was even called the Big Sur. PSA, AirCal, United, Continental, Western, we were all flying it in the test mode without complaints. What is happening now, and I live in SoCal, where I'm about, 3.5, 4 miles inland, and occasionally I listen to Air Traffic Control, NorCal, who controls the aircraft at the lower altitudes, and invariably, invariably, and Bert's the only person I see here who can talk directly to them, when they give an aircraft a speed command, the only way an airplane can slow down is extend the speed brakes. That's the only method they have other than to level out, and then they're going to miss one of the downstream fixes. So if we could talk to NorCal and say no speed brakes after Epic waypoint, the 60 miles that they're on the arrival prior to reaching Epic, they've got plenty of time to slow airplanes.
Thank you very much. George Wiley, followed by Donald Wright and Rosemary Hirschbach.
Thank you, George Wiley, San Lorenzo Valley. Subsequent to the dissolution of the Committee on South Bay Arrivals, the city and the county of Santa Cruz have independently and jointly stated opposition by resolution and letters to the idea of arbitrarily moving noise from one part of the county to another. The guiding directive and overarching goal of the Select Committee and of this committee was to achieve regional consensus. With the two largest government bodies in Santa Cruz County, that is the city and the county, objecting to the movement of the surfer flight path, how can we possibly call this consensus? And secondly, the Select Committee made 9 recommendations, and apparently those recommendations, and as conditions to the movement from surfer or the design of a new flight path, and some of these recommendations cannot be met, specifically number 2 and number 4. So I'd like to ask the FAA if this doesn't matter, were these optional?
Thank you very much, George. I appreciate it. Donald Wright.
Thank you. Yes, excuse me, I'm Donald Wright. I'd like to build on something that the chair had mentioned earlier regarding the information that the FAA has already, if they look at the transcripts from the previous meetings. My request is that the FAA not squander this opportunity to have a success story. There's so much cynicism in this country these days about what government can't do. There's a real lack of trust in institutions. And so the long delays and poor communication and ambiguous communication by the FAA about their process and progress on implementing the Select Committee's recommendations have unnecessarily fueled cynicism and negative thinking about the government around Santa Cruz now as well. The FAA and elected officials have the chance to have a success story that they can crow about. This is a case where there was and is harm being done by the FAA by flying surfer instead of BSR. The citizens complained in an orderly fashion, and then the elected officials and the FAA worked to develop a consensus solution. But that powerful demonstration of how the democratic process can work won't happen if the FAA doesn't follow through and implement the solution in a timely manner and communicate what they are doing on a regular basis with explicit timetables.
Thank
Please,
you.
FAA,
You've been cut off.
Help yourself and help us too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rosemary Hirschbach. You may have noticed his volume went off too, so just as a clue. Rosemary.
My name is Rosemary Hirschbach, and I have a significant amount of air sound pollution coming from the airplanes, jets that emit a very high pitched buzzing sound constantly circulating by flying around my house and neighborhood day and night. I live at 742 and 748 San Miguel Canyon Road in Royal Oaks in Monterey County, up on the hill where the jet noises are clear and loud. I am very sensitive to these high-pitched jet noises, which has caused me to a lot of stress and prolonged lack of sleep and peace in my property. I suggest that the FAA make airplane route changes that do not fly over my home or go back to the old routes that flew over Big Sur and Granite Rock in San Benito County and Santa Clara County. If you were to come to my home, you would know exactly what I mean when I say the jets flying over my neighborhood.
Thank you.
They cause a very agitating disturbance on the countryside.
Thank you
very
much.
distinct and violating.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It would be wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. Supervisor John Leopold, Christine Johnson, and Gloria Wells.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Santa Cruz. Before March 2015, we did not talk about airplanes in Santa Cruz County. We're 60 miles away from the airport. The only thing we talked about airports is how long it would take to get there, not about the noise. In March 2015, that was ripped open here in Santa Cruz County, and as you can see by the people here, a lot of people have been affected. This group did what they were asked. They were told to file complaints. Before Next Gen, one complaint, now there's been millions. They went to the select committee meetings, and I was part of that group, and we worked very hard to work directly with the FAA to change the way people felt about the FAA as an institution that was actually responsive. And we got involved very technical discussions, and we came up with something that really worked. And I want you to honor that and honor the people who have come to many, many meetings so we can complete this process and return to a community that talks about sunshine, the ocean, and other things, and not the sound of jet noise over our community.
Thank you very much. Christine Johnson, Gloria Wells, and John Cowan. Christine? Nope. Gloria, go ahead. Okay.
Hi, I listened very carefully to what you said today, and I'm hearing that you're working on all select committee items, and I'm wondering if you can maybe take the Big Sur overlay, BSR overlay, and expedite that, because that would empty out a lot of the people in the room that you're seeing right now. And I'm also hearing that you're working on a specific design already. What design are you looking at? What route? What are the altitudes? Where is the glide path of that route? And also, is there any braking and then power up? These are the things that are critical to the people in this room, and I wish that this is the focus that you will take when you're looking at your routes. My family has lived for 100 years on the same pristine parcel in the Soquel Hills. The noise is awful, and we don't want to move. We just wouldn't feel right about it. So anyway, and it's been horrible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Cowan. John, any? Okay. No. John Perry. Followed by Stephanie Petrozek.
Thank you all for being here and for giving us this chance to speak. I'm John Perry, and I live on Skyline Boulevard at 3,000 feet. NextGen puts profits before people. Ask yourself, if the FAA did something that tanked airline profits overnight, would the problem still be unsolved 4 years later? Besides money, the other thing that gets the attention of the FAA seems to be death. They weren't able to make the Boeing 737 MAX safe before it got into the air, but now that some people have died, suddenly they're interested. Is that what it's going to take? The deaths of mountain residents who don't hear their smoke detectors or don't hear that reverse 911 call in the middle of the night warning of a forest fire because they're wearing earplugs so that they can sleep. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, you signed up for 4, 5, or 6?
Just 5.
Just 5. Good.
Not that verbose.
All right. Thank you.
First of all, I want to clarify something. This isn't a Santa Cruz issue. It is an entire Mid-Peninsula and Santa Cruz issue, so let's not forget that. I have my own little timeline. 4 years plus a few months ago, this happened. Then 2.5 years later, the Select Committee came out with resolutions. Then nothing, absolutely nothing. And it was a supermajority that voted. So I'm struggling with we're delayed because there was a 6-week shutdown over the course of 2.5 years. I don't really understand that math, but I'm in the real world. And what I'm hearing is it's going to take 1 to 2 years to fix this. That means a total of 6 years from failure to fix. You can fix it now. You did for 1 month. Flip the switch, don't know the technical terms. Give us the peace and quiet while you work through the rest of what it is you need to work through. But for God's sakes, I had to install an air conditioner for the first time in my life because I can no longer sleep with my windows open.
Thank you. Linda McCann, Rich Everett, Cheryl Poland.
Hi, thanks you guys for being here. I know your job must be really hard. I get that. All you too. I wouldn't want to do that. I know. Okay. But I don't know how long it took Next Gen to be from start to finish to be implemented. I haven't heard that. Maybe it was discussed at some point. But I know I love flying, and I know I was on the tarmac at San Jose, and when I was on at 6:20, and they said, "Well, we can't get off the ground. We're going to protect our neighbors here that live around San Jose." Okay, great. Well, what about the Korean Air? Why can't we just stop that one or everything after 12 a.m. or 9 or whatever it is? I've been raising my hand on most of this stuff, so I won't say anything more about that, but this was imposed. And I, too, our community grew up away from an airport. All these communities did. People that live by an airport know they live by an airport. And I've been at my place for over 30 years, and it's been horrific. It sounds like a fighter jet coming through my skylights every night, and I don't close my windows. And so I woke up this morning, 12:39 a.m., and it was the Korean one. And there's one other one that always says they never know. It was a B744 this morning at 1, and it doesn't say what airlines it was. Anyway, it was from LAX.
Thank you. Rich Everett? Oh, you're handing things in. Thank you.
I, too, want to thank everybody for coming here. I know it's a long way, traffic, all that. I'm missing work right now. Why? Because it's one of the most important things that's affected my family, my neighbors, and my community. So I tried to think of new news to tell you that might prove the point. First of all, John Leopold's talk was exactly, I think, right on the money. But the two things I want to bring up is, one, in, I think, 30 or 40 years, the FAA received a handful of complaints about the old route. And then since 2015, it's received millions. That's got to say something about the urgency to move on this issue. The second thing that I just want to see if you could go home with tonight, I wish I could have you over at my house. I'm buying drinks, and you could hear the same thing I hear, my family here, neighbors here. But the second thing is, what if in your neighborhood you woke up tomorrow and a semi-truck went by your house, and you went, well, someone down the street's moving, must be Mayflower. You get home that night, and whoever's at your house says, hey, something really weird's happened. Or a couple hundred semi-trucks with their brakes going right past your house. You would say, wow, something's wrong, let's do something about it. So think of that semi-truck issue in front of your house.
Thank you. Cheryl Poland, followed by Dan Hirsch, Ruth Siegel, and Jennifer Landisman.
I'm Cheryl Poland, founder of Quiet Skies NorCal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I think it's pretty obvious that people really need an expedited schedule. The region's been impacted for 4 years. Asking us to wait another 24 months is really unacceptable, and I'd like to request that every avenue be taken to expedite the schedule. And I just wanted to remind everyone that another reason we need to get the BSR overlay done is so we can fix bricks, which is the San Jose arrival that hits us less than 2,000 feet. So please expedite. Thank you for your time. Special thanks to Congresswoman Eshoo and Congressman Panetta, because we wouldn't be here without them.
Thank you. Dan Hirsch.
Let's be crystal clear about what's been going on here today.
You are supposed to be carrying out the Select Committee's recommendations. The Select Committee said do not move it to Big Sur unless all 9 recommendations made by the Select Committee are carried out. FAA has said it will not do so. We've heard the FAA say they're responding to the community, but the County of Santa Cruz and the City of Santa Cruz have officially taken the position that the effort should be made to reduce noise where it is, not move it. You're getting the resolutions passed out to you right now. Lastly, I live where that noise is supposed to be moved. These people are saying my life matters less than theirs. We're not talking about returning it to Big Sur. We're talking about an entirely different procedure at lower altitude, and that month that they keep talking about was sheer hell. 50% of the flights now go over the San Lorenzo Valley. Burdens should be equally distributed. Dumping it all on other people is inappropriate, and you as a panel should be carrying out the Select Committee, not sabotaging it. Thank you.
You very much. Ruth Segal, Jennifer Landesman, Mauricio Fremont, Robert Holbrook, and Tony Schloss. Those are the end of my speaker slips. If anyone else wants to speak, don't. No. I don't mean that. I can't do that. But please, go ahead.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here, including the FAA, the Select, or the working group, and I have been at just about every meeting since this started. I, too, bought my house specifically not under a flight path, not under a freeway, a very long distance from where I work, where I've been commuting to for over 30 years. My career is about over. I am a menopausal woman. I have not been able to open my windows for over 4 years. I am not sleeping. I am trying, and I have stopped reporting the midnight, 1 a.m., 3 a.m. loud noises because I found that the fighting this noise, the reporting the noise, is almost as stressful as the noise itself. So you can count extra reports from me that are not being pressed on my little app. Thank you again so much. Please expedite this. We did not have this process, and it was not fair to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Landesman.
Hi, I'm concerned about your staffing capability being only 10% for all the things that you do, because the data, the objective data we need requires a lot more work. And I've heard from Volpe, which is the group that can do the AEDT things, that they could do a route in a day or a system of routes in a week. So having objective data shouldn't take that long, unless the FAA is saying that you cannot produce the data. And that would be really bad. Now, during the Select Committee, we did not have the required modeling tools, and I know that because from your area, the word was, don't have ADT, and even if we had it, wouldn't know what to do with it, because it was not part of the environmental process. So now things are changing, and it would be a complete disaster if this would be run on an objective base, a subjective basis. We need the data, we need noise data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mauricio Fremont.
So I have 2 specific requests for this roundtable that are related to the Big Sur overlay design. The first thing is, please ask the FAA how the historic overlay was calculated. That's a very important detail. And the second request is, ask the FAA to consider GBAS in the BSR overlay design. When SFO asked at the full working group meeting in June to consider GBAS in the discussions, in the design, they were told no, it's not on the agenda. So for those of you not familiar with GBAS, it's a GPS-based landing system that SFO will implement next year, and if it's deployed properly, it could reduce impact on communities. So GPS technology should not be used only to concentrate planes, it should be used to reduce noise and emissions on the ground. So if it's implemented properly, it can disperse planes, it can make them fly higher, it can be following routes that are based on compatible land uses. So please ask the FAA to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Holbrook.
I heard 2 things today that I thought were interesting. One I knew and one that I didn't. The one I didn't know was that the full working group is convened at project initiation. And the thing that I did know was that from project initiation, it can take 2 years for a procedure to roll out. The reason I know that is because Glenn Martin, who was the head of the Western Region back when the Select Committee was running, told us that. And that group was quite disappointed to think it could be 2.5 years before the procedure was rolled out. What I think nobody would have anticipated is that the project would not have gotten started for more than 2.5 years from the time the report was formally submitted. The full working group happened in June. The report was submitted to the FAA in November of 2016. You guys need to expedite this process, and to do that, first and foremost, you need a program manager to come up with a plan that lays all the stuff out, the stuff that Glenn was talking about, to make this happen.
Thank you. And Tony Schloss.
Hi, Tony Schloss. A few points. One, a correction. The County of Santa Cruz took no position on the Select Committee recommendations. Second, you've got to understand that there was extensive public input at that time, which has initiated this design work. So there has been extensive public input, and now the FAA is responding to that. That's a good thing. Third, at the time of the Select Committee recommendations, the regional director of the FAA, Glenn Martin, told us that because of all the design work they had done, he estimated 6 to 12 months to implement the return to the Big Sur ground track. So that's why the year to 2 years now is met with so much disdain and doubt. We're wondering why the extended time period. Lastly, if I may say, isn't there some intermediary that the ATC can do? Can't the regional director talk to the air traffic control to quiet the procedures as was asked before?
Thank you, Tony. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, I do not have any more speaker slips for this item. So I will close the public hearing since I do not see anyone racing to the dais. Thank you all for being here today and expressing yourselves. There's more to come. Okay.
And Madam Chair, I'm going to mention that I know, Favi, you have to catch a flight to Anchorage, and Shawn is taking you. So the FAA will be leaving. It's not because they want to run away. They actually have to catch a flight and head out. So thank you.
Okay. In regard for all of our time, we have, with your approval and the fact that we are well over our agenda time of closing, I'm going to ask that we continue item number 6, which is the discussion and adoption of priority levels on the IFP Gateway Matrix.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would like to make a comment on item 5 before we move on from that. I made a comment all meeting, and I'd like to make one comment before I walk out of the room. Just for clarification, to some of the people I know are familiar here, I was on the Select Committee, and I take resentment to the what people say, what the Select Committee's intentions were, or what they decided. And I just want to make it clear to those that are still in the room, and I'm not sure if there are individuals who are here, but the Select Committee voted 8-4 to pass a measure. And that, and whether you call it a slim majority or whatever, it was what we agreed upon to do. Number 2, we made an agreement to move Big Sur, Surfer back to Big Sur. That was agreed on. The conditions that were given there, they were considerations, not conditions. There was nothing conditional. So I just want you to understand that what the intent of what the Select Committee did, I believe the FAA knows that, and I think if you read between the lines, what they said is they're moving forward now. We can't fix the fact that it took 2 years to get us where we are today, what happened in that June meeting. They are moving forward. I believe that, and I'm optimistic that that will happen. We will still meet resentment and resistance from people moving it back, because the intent of the Select Committee is that after we learned the lesson of what happened with Surfer, we were not going to move noise again. That didn't mean we weren't going to put the noise back where it came from. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I agree with Ed, having served on the Select Committee also. Is there any other comment on this? See no other comment. May I have a motion to continue item? And a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, this will be continued to our next meeting. So that's item number 6. We did have 2 speaker slips here, Marie-Jo and Jennifer.
And mine should be 7, I'm sorry.
You want 7, okay. Good, all right. Marie-Jo, I think you're already there on 7, so we are not commenting on 6. We are continuing item number 6, so there will be no comments received for item 6. Although, now we move on to item number 7, which is comments from the public. And again, given the overtime, I'm going to ask 1 minute, please. I think we've heard most of the topics covered, and you certainly know that we've got more comments and meetings coming. So if any of you would like to pull your cards back and hold them for the next meeting, it would be greatly appreciated.
And I would just add to the chair, if it's new information, that would be great. If it's ground we've already covered, if we could hold off, that would be great.
Yes, please. Thank you. Roseanne Bruni.
Yeah.
Kathleen Brown. Robert Holbrook. Darlene Yapley. Marie-Jo Fremont. Jennifer and Jennifer Landesman.
Hi, I'm Rosanna Bruni. I live in SoCal. I've had significant trouble understanding, and this is back to item number 3, the recommendation of the resolution, the language. I'm not really understanding, and other people have asked me to clarify for them, and I thought I got it, but I don't get it. And that is, who is responsible for following up on the recommendations of the Select Committee? Is it now the Roundtable, or is it still our congressional reps? Because we've known it as our congressional reps. We've been going to Jimmy Panetta to get updates to his office, and now I'm just confused. And if you could please clarify that, that would be great. Thank you.
It's the Roundtable.
It's the Roundtable. Even though we didn't certify ourselves today, we are the body now. And go ahead and keep talking to your Congress people too, because we definitely heard that today. But we're here for the input for now going forward. Rosanna Bruni.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Brown. I live in SoCal. And I just wanted to say that my issue really isn't about item number 5. It is about not on the agenda because it has to do with democracy, and it has to do with the way that I thought democracy worked and the process that I went through for 4 years ago, including up to this point with lots of complaints. And it hasn't changed. And you know, at this rate, I'm going to be dead by the time this actually happens.
Thank you. I don't want to thank you for being dead, but thank you. Robert Holbrook, yes. Darlene Yapley.
I understand that for the next meeting, the topic of the response of the FAA to the ad hoc committee's recommendations is agendized. And I'd like to let you know. Oh, it's not? Well, perhaps you'll be discussing that in a moment. I have spent a good chunk of the last month since the last meeting combing through that document in detail. I have come up with a spreadsheet that lists all the recommendations, the FAA's response, and what I will suggest you might want to consider for each of the 64 line items, or at least most of them. And I have also developed a 4-page paper that distills 2 themes that I see in the FAA's responses and the approach that I think we should consider regarding those themes. I would encourage you to read that sooner rather than later. I'll be sending it to you soon. And as you discuss how to address these items, please allow a generous amount of time to cover the items that we have to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The May 13th letter from the Roundtable to the FAA asked 11 questions on Pirate. At the May 22nd Roundtable meeting, the FAA did not address the questions due to operational issues. 2 days later, a letter appeared to the Roundtable. Again, the FAA did not answer the majority of the questions. Questions like, where are the aircraft going to be routed and vectored after ARG? What communities are impacted, and what's the noise impact? These unanswered questions in collaboration on Pirate should continue to be addressed by the FAA and the Roundtable. Palo Alto decided not to litigate with the reasoning that they appreciate the efforts by the Regional Roundtable to address these issues, and Chairman Bernald firmly believes that the Roundtable is the best venue to engaging with the FAA in order to address Pirate concerns. Let's prove the doubters wrong. Let's truly show that the FAA and the Roundtable can have a productive discussion on Pirate without litigation, and I urge you to put this back on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marie-Jo?
Just following up on what Darlene just said, earlier today, Shawn from the FAA stated that if a community requests a review on some change on the procedure, they would consider it. Well, that did not happen with Pirate, and believe me, we tried. We went to multiple San Francisco Roundtable meetings, we tried letters, everything. We went on deaf ears. So please, as a body who wants to solve the problem, please request a community review on Pirate 2, because we have the noise now, and it's really in the middle of the night. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer? Jennifer Landesman, and then Dan Hirsch.
The San Jose Airport ad hoc report basically and effectively kind of denied everything. So based on that report, there really is no mitigation that I see from the FAA. Having said that, your task will be difficult in front of you. You're going to have to ask all sorts of questions and talk to the FAA to figure out if there are some solutions, and there should be. FAA placed us in this situation. They need to figure out how to mitigate the noise. They shifted and concentrated it under Next Gen. Please, please, please don't listen to a complete no on this. I would recommend that, as with the SFO Roundtable, that a technical working group get created to discuss some of these for the more technical aspects of this. And again, as far as like Darlene was talking about the night hush, again, don't take no for an answer. We need mitigations here. We really do. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, just so you know, I have two Jennifers. I wasn't just stuttering. There is Jennifer No Name, and there is Jennifer Landesman. So you'll come next.
So I'm going to say noise maps 5 times. Noise maps, noise maps, noise maps, noise maps, noise maps. You guys are working on noise, and there is no data or information about noise. It's not the FAA's job to do health. It is yours. So as you are depositing noise without any data, I think that's really wrong. It's unethical to do that. And so you have to have noise data. You can get it for anything that is being talked about today, and you can get it fast. You're just not asking for it. And that is a really, really big problem, because there's already, trust has been eroded completely by a lot of the political subjective processes. And I know it sounds, like a naysayer. It's not. It's because people are really suffering. And it's not just those in one color shirt and another color shirt. You have to be able to record the amount of noise you're depositing on people.
Thank you. Now, Dan.
Two statements were made that what I had said were false. One statement claims that the Select Committee never did what it did. So I'm going to read to you precisely what the Select Committee said. The Select Committee recommends that arrivals into SFO from the south use the BSR ground track for a new next-gen procedure that incorporates the criteria contained in recommendation 2 below. Those are the 9 criteria, 3 of which are not going to be carried out. So if you're going to carry out the Select Committee's recommendations, you have to say, do not move it to Big Sur, because the 9 criteria not being met. Secondly, the county's position is exactly as I stated. I'm going to read it. That the county's representative on the roundtable represent the county with the direction from this board that the representative work to relieve the immediate impacts of jet noise for those currently experiencing the impact without moving the noise over another part of the county. You are violating both the select committee and the official views of the county and city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no further speaker slips on item number 7. Anyone else wish to speak? Come forward, please. And if you don't mind, give us your name for the record.
My name is Chris Norton. I learned to fly out of San Jose. I have a little bit of experience. I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains directly under the path. The FAA moved forward and started this whole fiasco based on modeling noise. And the models were a complete joke. And I speak as a geologist. I speak as a person who's been involved in software modeling. The models were a joke, and this is what created their basis for making the move and running their move through really quickly. So I also know that during the last 3 years or so, there has been collection of data. And the data collection that was done, from what I understand, was done on machines that were approved by the FAA, and were carried out by people that had software engineering experience and placed those noise meters throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains. So there is some data out there. I don't know who has it. I'm sure some of the people that are close to the organization have it. So there's something to start with.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I realize my microphone goes off at the same time that yours goes off. It's time to leave. So we have finished item number 7, comments from the public. We now move on to membership discussion. So those of us who have remained quiet will have an opportunity. Just to clarify, there seemed to be some confusion at the last meeting. This is the opportunity for the members to speak. We will not be accepting community comment at this point. I would like, if I may have your interest and attention and permission to present a chair report at this point, and then I will happily take comments from the rest of you. This last week, I sent out letters to the San Francisco Roundtable chair and also the, Oakland Noise Forum individuals, expressing interest in becoming partners with them, so for several reasons, so that we will begin to look more regionally whenever possible at the efforts. Bert has already said he attended a roundtable meeting today. I would like to be able to somehow in the future be able to coordinate some of those efforts with San Francisco so that we are not reinventing the wheel or reinventing the presentations. I've also told the FAA that certainly if they are giving something to Oakland or to San Francisco, that they do not have to rewrite that program, that presentation, if it affects us in the same way, or just a minor tweak here and there. So I'm hoping that that will work out better. The next item that I have on my list is polling all of you regarding our summer meeting schedule. As I said, as Lisa has said, they're on vacation. I'd like to respect your time if you have plans in July or August to be leaving, and I need to assure that we as an organization have a quorum. So I guess the best thing to do at this point is to go down the line, and I start at this end for introductions. Lydia, I'll start with you.
I'm going to be here.
July and August.
July and August, yes.
Cynthia.
Thank you.
A microphone on.
Yeah, probably gone the first week in August, TBD.
Normally we are meeting on the 4th, so that sounds good. Okay. Anita, you're looking at your calendar?
I'm here. I have a conflict that I'll have to be in part of this meeting and then leave and be in part of another meeting.
For July?
For July. August is not a problem.
Okay. Steve?
I'm scheduled to be here for both meetings.
Glenn?
We should meet.
Steve, can we get you here?
I'll be here, Madam Chair.
Okay, good. Lisa.
So while the city council isn't meeting, actually that works great for this because I am around and now I have more time to devote to this. So I would like to have meetings during the summer.
Great. Carlos.
I have a conflict in July, but my alternate will be available, and I am available in August.
Michelle.
I'll be here.
And Ed?
Both meetings.
And Kathy?
Both meetings.
Okay, good. And we're moving ahead on that. That's terrific. One of the items that has been presented to me is a potential NASA visit. NASA is doing amazing work with the FAA to create planes that are going to just be the wave of the future, I would hope. And I am curious to know if you would like to have a presentation from NASA, or if you would also, if we could possibly arrange it, have a tour from NASA.
With all due respect, our meetings are already overbooked, and I think that we should be spending our meeting time on core issues regarding work with the FAA. And as much as I would love to go to NASA, I'd like it, if we're going to do it, that it be a separate trip, not something that takes up meeting time.
Karen Chapman has just joined us, and you're the person that I've been talking to about the possible connection with NASA. I probably didn't do it justice. Could you explain what might be possible for us?
Is this one? I think the idea was just to have NASA Ames come and speak to you and make a presentation on what they're working on in terms of green aviation. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that they're doing. They're working closely with the FAA, so.
Okay, thank you very much. We will, any other input on that? Feelings pro or con?
I'm going to agree. I mean, that sounds like a great thing to happen in maybe 2020. I think we have just more immediate needs.
Okay, okay. Anybody on this side want to have any input?
I would agree with those comments.
Okay, good. We tried. We'll continue to circle around. One of the items that I wanted to have you note is the letter from Adam Schiff to the GAO asking for more legislation regarding airplane noise, signed by, I believe it was 29 congressionals. And also one further item, I'm finding the noise newsletters extraordinarily beneficial. And if you haven't had a chance to read them yet, I would highly recommend that you read all of them. But the one that I'm specifically excited about is the legislation that is found in the latest newsletter dated 6/21 on airport noise. It's an airport noise report. Now, other items from members. Lydia.
So I earlier asked if we could have certain items on the next meeting's agenda, and I'd like to request to have the Big Sur overlay on the agenda. And since we have to ask questions 30 days ahead of the FAA, I was wondering if I might be able to submit that to you. Do you want me to say it here, or shall I just email it to you?
Is this based on any letter or anything that we received today that's prompting this, or?
No, since they're starting the discussions, I thought, it'll be good to have further information. And since they did have their working group meet already, and I'm hoping by the next meeting, Bert might be able to give an update of what they've decided or what they spoke about, or even the FAA persons might be, representatives might be able to speak to that too. In some of the questions is, can the FAA confirm that they're using the design objectives for the Big Sur overlay as defined by the Select Committee's 2 recommendations? In 1.2R1, which is use the Big Sur ground track for a new next-gen procedure that incorporates the criteria in recommendation. And then also 1.2R2, which is implement as soon as feasible and include 9 criterias. Then question number 2 is the procedure that the FAA is developing meeting the design objectives of the Select Committee. And then question number 3, I think I asked about providing an update on the BSR overlay, but would like to know what is the proposed procedure such as the ground track, altitude, waypoint, speed, etc.? And then how does it compare to Surfer 3 and Surfer? And what are the stated expected benefits? And also, I think one of the members of the public, I'm not sure if it was Darlene or Marie Jo or Robert or Jennifer, who asked about GBAS. Can that be somehow reconsidered and added into it? Also, I'd like to have the questions about Pirate that was put forth to them from the previous meetings answered as well, including the increased night flights. And I think you did answer our mayor's letter that we would hope to look into decreasing night flights and open the conversation and dialogue about that, at least at minimum. And I agree we should start working on a technical committee if possible, please. I think there's a lot of technicalities coming our way, and it will be beneficial for us to have that. Thank you so much.
I have some questions for you. We received both Alistair Fife's letter, and you sent it to us, or you sent it to the, I'm sorry, which one is it?
No, he dropped it off just now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's to the
Yeah, we just didn't receive it in time to include it with the
to
agenda.
include it in there. Would it be, because those answers do come from need to come from the FAA, I'm trying to break down all the parts that you did here, that we can ask them to respond to the letter, and we give it over to them, to the responsibility to them to respond to the contents in there, which are not that different from what I understand the concerns are with, from Palo Alto. And from some others.
Heads are shaking no.
No, but, okay. I'm sorry, we're discussing this.
I think, yeah. Yes.
So regarding the criteria and recommendation 1.2, recommendations 1, 2, and 4 basically are the ones that I would ask your permission that we refer that discussion to the FAA to answer in at the very least in a letter form, so that they will sort it out.
I appreciate that. Do you want the letter to come from, it's going to come from you or from me? Or from Alistair?
We've got his letter. Those contents will be forwarded to the FAA. And now for the other things, we've got I'm hearing GBAS included, Pirate, night flights, technical committee. Those are things that I believe would, under normal circumstances, go into our priority list. And so, because we have to agendize things and we really do want to start working. So it would be very beneficial, I believe, for all of us. I can't speak for you, but I want to make sure that what I'm saying is correct, and reflecting what you are saying is that it would be beneficial for us as a group to prioritize what we want to see happen first in our agendas. We can't deal with all of these items as we've seen today in one meeting.
No, I understand that you have to prioritize. I think the two procedures, especially Pirate, at this point, it's something that, since we've already provided the questions, it will be really, it'll be beneficial for us to understand what FAA is thinking, and what they're, just to kind of let our community know what they're doing.
Yes. And for the night flights, I think this is probably something that will be an ongoing thing.
Yes, I understand that. Right. I just want to make sure that that's a bullet point under Pirate, that we want to try to address that.
Steve, help me. I got technical committee going in reverse order. Technical, night flights, decrease them. Pirate, GBAS, BSR overlay. Was there anything else that I'm missing here on that?
No, I think that's for the time being.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go down the line then. Cynthia, if I may, anything? No. Okay. Anita.
I'd just like to emphasize that with Pirate, I believe there are still outstanding questions on data requests that originated from the letters from Palo Alto and the early letter from Mountain View and Los Altos jointly signed that basically have been completely ignored. So in part of the Pirate presentation, I would like to get both baseline and after the implementation data, whatever they've got that they just, for whatever reason, have ignored us about.
Is that it? Anything else?
Yep, for right now, I'll just, I subscribe to the rest of your priorities at the moment.
Steve.
Oh, and thank you for setting up the possible joint thing with the other two roundtables.
Thank you. I hope to hear from them. Glenn.
Yeah, I have a couple things. First off, I want to thank all the people from Santa Cruz that came out today, and I would encourage us as a body to continue to periodically schedule a meeting over here on this side. I think that the number of people that showed up showed it's important for us to go ahead and have meeting locations over here. So I want to thank you all for coming out. We keep talking about that we want to have a discussion about pirate and all these other things. Through the chair, I'd like to request that the FAA provide us whatever form of schedule or timeline that they have, because for me it's very difficult to we keep trying to have these point discussions about them and we don't understand the broader perspective. And even if they walk in and say, here, it's procedure X, and the piece of paper is blank because they don't have a schedule, that's much easier for me to work with, because then we can make specific comments about what are you doing. So I just think that would help our ability to discuss these different topics. And then I guess we're going to get to a question of at whichever meeting we think we're going to go ahead and deal with the ad hoc response. So I just don't know when. I'd like to understand when that's going to be so I can tell people in the South Bay.
Okay, great. I will, if I may, to your discussion, Glenn, I pushed very hard for timelines, and what I get back is everything is fluid. I still think we need to make that kind of motion, definitely.
I would just suggest, even if, like I said, I've done program management stuff, and I would find the fact that somebody tells me it's either complex or fluid and they can't show me a schedule, that's when my danger, Will Robinson goes off and goes, that's when I want to see what it is. How do you even schedule resources within the FAA? So even if they don't have durations, if they could provide a sequence of steps, I mean, that's the first place to go ahead and start. And then, because I'm not even worried about duration, I want to understand, do you do step 1, step 2, step 3, what are the prerequisites? And I think that's a place to start in asking them. If they don't know the exact dates of when things will happen or duration, that's fine, but we can start to see sequence in the flow of how they actually work. So it sounded like you said you wanted to keep pushing on that, and we should do that. And if needed, maybe we could get our congressional offices to try and help, because I just don't understand how they function as a group. If they do function some way. I mean, let's not, but if I was in my work company, and if somebody came and said, I don't have a schedule, I'd say, okay, here, stop everything that everybody's doing and make a schedule. I mean, that's what you do. And I think we need to go ahead and ask for that. Again, they may not be able to give all the detail that I'd like to see, but you start with, what are the tasks you need to do, even if you don't know what order you're going to do them in. Even if you don't know which, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. Write those things down, because then that helps facilitate the discussion of being able to figure out what you're going to do. And, I'd be happy to sign a contract with the federal government and help teach them about program management. But this is program management 101, kindergarten and crayon stuff.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I also would like to get into the ad hoc committee response. As Glenn mentioned, I'm feeling kind of frustrated that we're not digging into the meat of topics here. So actually, when it comes to future meetings, I think I'd like to see fewer topics, but more depth in those topics, so that I feel like we're making some progress. I also agree that we should explore the technical committee, because as we've heard a number of times, there are lots of topics here that are technical, and I think we need to be able to participate in those discussions and have a group that works on that.
Carlos.
I agree with the comments, Glenn and Lisa, about the timelines and program management. But specifically, I was wondering if we could ask the FAA for a schedule regarding the environmental review process for the Big Sur overlay recommendation. The only time frame that was given today was 24 months. and that clearly is not acceptable. And so I would like for us to put in writing specifically, please give us a time frame for the environmental review process for the Big Sur overlay procedure change. And if we can get something in writing, that would be a great benefit to the community. At least then they can have some idea about where we're going.
Thank you. Michelle.
I definitely agree that we should have something to get hold on and to track the progress. But the other thing is hearing what the FAA people are saying. Apparently, there is a disconnect between myself and probably other people that were coming from a private industry. Everything has a program manager, has a schedule, has deliverables, and you're holding accountable for what you said. But FAA's response is like, what timeline? I hope whoever said 24 months don't go back and get himself in trouble because he said 24 months. That's apparently he tried not to answer that question. Go around, and eventually we kind of beat him down to say, tell us what exactly time. He said roughly 24 months. I would like to see that how FAA really function internally without any program management, without any tracking. Do they just have an open-ended schedule and keep on going? So maybe a better understanding of how they works as well.
Ed.
I'm good.
I'm glad. Kathy.
The ad hoc, the South Flow ad hoc, just continuing to follow up with that, and I agree with the other roundtable members that we need to stay on top of it and address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I may be putting you on a spot because there's a high level of frustration here with what we're getting from the FAA in terms of how timelines work. Could you prepare something that would be an overview from your experience, or are we looking directly to the FAA to present something that we have not been able to get from them whatsoever?
Well, I have a couple ideas about this, Madam Chair. One is the FAA has given us their sort of overview of what the procedure development process is and the general timeframes that are associated with that, which is about that 18 to 24 month period. It has a little bit more detail. And we have seen that. We can certainly share that again and take a look at it. I think what I'm hearing is, particularly for the Big Sur issue, is when is this going to happen? In particular, when will the public engagement going to happen? And I think we really need the FAA to pin that down for this group. As you know, we will follow up with the FAA after this meeting as we have a process to do that, to see what the IOU items are, and we can certainly impress upon them to get that for us.
My frustration is that we've been told that we cannot ask them to come back every time.
Right.
So at a minimum, that looks like August, at a minimum. And it's as I said, it's my frustration. It's many of our frustrations. So anything else besides writing the letter tonight? Is it?
You know, I get exactly what Glenn's talking about. That's what we work with for all of our projects. We know when they're going to start. Yeah. We know what the deliverables are. We know when they're going to end. But I can't, I mean, as much as I'd like to, I can't develop that because I don't have no idea what their resources are or how many people they have dedicated to it. It's something that we would need to get from them for this specific project.
Is this something that you believe that we could actually do in formally requesting it, and then that they could respond to it without necessarily being here, which is not perfect, but at least may
I would
meet
hope
their...
so, yeah.
Okay, so that's what, is that agreeable that we will make the request and we will see, and we'll continue to push to get that back?
Yeah,
and then
one of my worries is that we're kind of getting in a catch-22 where the FAA is saying, well, we'll engage with the public if you help us with what we should do, and we're going, we don't know what it is that we can do, and we don't know when it is we can do it. And so we just kind of go in a circle. I thought there was also ambiguity about, is the public engagement process occurring only through the NEPA process, or is it another, is there a second inflection point in the rest of the technical development? And I don't know, that was clear as mud to me. Maybe I just missed it.
No, Anita, you did not miss it. And this was a discussion that I had prior to our meeting here requesting it too. So Glenn?
Yeah, no, I would say let's keep requesting. If they can get us something in writing for a July meeting, I think I know how to read a project plan. I'm pretty good at that. And if we can give them more feedback, and if their real thing comes in August, I'll deal with that too. I mean, it's one of those kind of things that I can want things, on whatever schedule I want, but I want somebody to commit to something and then deliver it and put it in writing in front of me, because then I can ask questions about it. And I think, July would be great. If we get it in August, that's fantastic. If we get something in August and we give them more feedback on what we want and we get it in September, that just puts us farther ahead than if we don't get that information. So the more you, and I want to thank you for what you're doing to interface directly with them, and please keep asking them for it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so what I'm hearing, Steve, maybe it's better, since that's the next item, that you summarize the action items and not what I'm hearing?
Well, I guess there are two different things, Madam Chair. One is the action items that I review here are actions that the roundtable has taken, and then there are member requests.
Yes.
And typically what we do for the member requests is review the tape, chat with you, and then come up with the list as we understand it, which is exactly what we will do. In terms of the action items that we've taken, the roundtable unanimously agreed to table the resolution regarding the roundtable acting as the follow-on committee to select committee for this meeting, and also to receive input from the roundtable members coming into the chair and myself, so that we can rewrite that, recast it, and bring it back to the roundtable. And then also the other action that the roundtable took was for item number 6, the IFP Gateway. Obviously, we ran out of time, and that was continued. Although it was mentioned to the next meeting, we might consider it being a future meeting, just to adhere to what Lisa was talking about, that we want to make sure that the agendas are as meaty as possible. So,
the one thing that does bring is the priority. It does express the priority level that we have as a roundtable, and so I have seen it as beneficial, but perhaps it'll weave its way into what we're going forward from our discussion here.
Madam Chair, can I suggest that perhaps Steve could develop a draft of that we could review ahead of time with his notes as to, there's priority based on importance, but there's also priority based on time frame. And some of those things that are, if they're farther down the row, they might be Bs, but they're close to going pop. So we have to deal with them now, as opposed to something that may be the highest priority in terms of impact, but it's going to be another 8 months before anything significant happens, so we could wait. And he's the one who's really got, you're the one who has the expertise, who could really sort those for us, and I think that would save us a lot of time.
And Anita, you're talking sort of a work program type draft document?
I'm talking about a priority and sequencing for dealing with those issues based on that kind of algorithm, if that makes sense.
Okay. Are we good?
Madam Chair, may I mention one thing?
Yes.
We asked the members of the audience to follow certain rules. I think they did a fantastic job. We really appreciate it. Many of the red shirt folks have left, but for those of you who are still here, thank you very much. It makes the meeting much more pleasant for everyone to be in, and I thank you for adhering to those. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So are we in agreement from what we've heard before I call it an adjournment?
Everything? I'm sorry, if I could just do one more thing. Somewhere maybe you could be written down, there was a lot of statements made that we were making decisions that was moving air traffic around. And I want to be clear, we're not doing that. We don't have that kind of authority to what to do. We're going to end up making recommendations that have to go through FAA processes and all kinds of stuff like that. So just to everybody that, pointed their finger at us and said we were or we're not doing certain things, I just want to be clear that that's not an authority we have. We can make certain recommendations and try and cue things up in the FAA, but we're not the ultimate authority to make decisions to move things around.
Thank you. Any further statements? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
I think we've got it. Thank you. Thank you all today.
We can applaud now.
Thank you.
We can applaud now.
Yeah.